The following podcast contains spoilers, adult language, and what it sounds like when doves cry.
This is a message from the Office of Emergency Preparedness. Due to the recent crisis, we ask that you remain in your homes. Do not attempt to communicate or interact with the creatures, even if they are people you know.
Lock your doors. Bar your windows. Evil is coming. It's time for Aim for the Head, a horror apocalypse entertainment podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Diana and Steve.
Hi, and welcome back to Aim for the Head podcast. I'm Diana.
And I'm Prince.
You look great in heels, by the way.
I'm the artist formerly known as Prince. No, that's still not right. No. Hello.
Wait. What are we doing? That's Steve, by the way. And this week, we can't believe that we're here, but this week we're discussing the series finale of Stranger Things. Name of the episode is Chapter 8, The Rightside Up. And let me tell you, I am surprised that we're here. It's pretty unbelievable. It was a quick 8 weeks to talk about this final season, and I know every time we cover a show and we get to the end, we're like, oh my god, I can't believe we're here, but this went pretty quick. I honestly thought it would feel longer just because some of their episodes tend to take a little longer, and this one by no means. I mean, this was fairly long as well. So here we are. Normally before we get into the details of the actual episode, if this is your first time here, hello. And also, we like to do a real quick rapid fire, what our quick thoughts were on what we just watched, before we get into the finer points. So, Steve, you went first last week, so it's my turn to go first. So, Diana, what are your quick thoughts? Well, let me tell you. My thoughts on the finale are, much like a lot of the other episodes from this season as a whole, there's a lot of episodes that I was kind of when I watched them the first time, but I liked them more when I watched them a second or a third time. And I think the finale is the same way. I feel like I like a lot of it more. I still think in terms of a final battle, and I'm using air quotes here, but the final battle with the final boss, I feel like it was a little too, I for lack of a better word, I will say easy, but I don't think that their battle itself was, I feel like everything sort of fell into place a little bit more than usual for them. Like, it's kind of like driving down the street and you hit all green lights. They hit all green lights mostly. And I was surprised. And so there was a little bit of dissatisfaction with that. And I know I'm probably not alone, because I know I've read some online discourse about it. But even though that's the case, now that my slight disappointment over the weight of it is over, and I can sort of look at the nuts and bolts of it, a majority of it, if you take away the part that it's like the battle itself was slightly underwhelming and just look at the little bits and pieces of it, I really, really enjoyed it a lot more. I looked at Nancy's individual arc, or Steve's individual arc for the episode, and I really, really, really enjoyed it a lot more in little pieces as opposed to the finale itself. So slightly disappointed in the battle, enjoyed all of the storylines leading into the battle, and I definitely think that when it comes to the final wrap-up, like the epilogue, the coda, as it were, with the kids, they definitely stuck the landing on that and hit all of the emotional arcs that I think that a good series finale wants to hit. And it didn't feel fan servicey to me, like that second hour. So ultimately, I would say I'm really satisfied with how the series ended. and I really liked this episode. How about you? What did you think of? Because to me, I feel like the finale is two different things. It's the final battle, and it's also how did they wrap it all up. There's wrapping it all up in terms of the battle and wrapping it all up in terms of the people. So that's how I sort of approached it. But what did you think of it?
Yeah, it was okay.
That's fine.
No, again, it was. I think in terms of series finales, I've seen way worse.
I'm looking at you, Dexter.
Yeah. I mean, there's, come on. I mean, Lost. Hello. I mean, there's a lot of shows that when they get that chance to kind of really, wrap things up in a satisfactory way, they really struggle. And this show, I think, didn't. And I agree with you that the actiony part of it was very quick. I mean, they show up. They poke, the antenna pokes through the other world. They go up there. And then zap. They kill them and they kill the mind flayer and it's done. It's over. And you're like, oh, okay. But they did that so that they could have, literally like 46 minutes or whatever to wrap up all the personal storylines. And again, that's what you were just saying, that, the second half of the episode, if you will, where it's all just, what does they say? It's like 18 months later or whatever.
Like that,
and now it's graduation day, so all of the kids are, even though they're like 36 in real life, they're graduating high school. Then you have the older kids that are getting together and drinking beer on the top of the radio station, because I guess in Indiana you can do that without a problem. And of course, you've got Hop and Joyce, and that really, I mean, so they hit everybody, right? I mean, the only person we really didn't get a final thing on was Murray. Whatever happened to him, right? But that part of it, you're right, very satisfying in that they kind of let us see how, at least in the short term, how is everyone doing, and what do their prospects look like going forward? And yeah, that, certainly, definitely, tries to, tug at the heartstrings. I mean, for myself, that, they're all cold and dead, so it didn't work. But for other normal people, I'm sure there was definitely some misty eyes and things going on when we saw all that stuff. So yeah, I like the final battle. You're right. I mean, it's funny because one of the characters, I don't know if it's Mike or someone, is talking and saying, like, so many things are probably going to go wrong, but we're going to get through it. And then, like, nothing really goes wrong, It's just like, oh, well, I didn't need to say that, I mean, it was just sort of like the most traumatic thing was when, the mind flayer kind of chased Nancy into, like, the ravine and was, like, right behind her. That was, other than that, they just beat the crap out of that thing, so... But again, it was fine. So I think, like I said, in terms of series finales, it worked, better than most. And overall, I liked the episode, and I thought, it was a fine way to wrap up the not just the story of the season, but the whole series. So yeah, so I'm right there. It was great. It wasn't spectacular. It wasn't like, oh my God, was that phenomenal? But it was good.
And I think when it comes to series finales, like series wrapping up, there's always going to be an element of you're going to be disappointed to a degree because you have connected with this story and these characters, and you're so used to, hey, we just finished every other season leading up to now has been, hey, we just conquered in this final battle, and then it's like a little drop of like, but there's this to come in the next, hang on and come back. And there is no hang on and come back. So they do the same thing where they sort of wrap everything up, but there's no, this little tidbit to pull you in to get excited about next season doesn't exist. So there's a little bit of a, disappointment that you're saying goodbye to something you enjoyed. And there's no like, ha, gotcha at the end of the episode for like, come back and, 6 to 25 months when we decide to drop the next season, whenever that may be. And I think even when a series finale is, quote unquote satisfying, there's always going to be people that are going to be unsatisfied. And a lot of it, I think, stems from they're saying goodbye. They're saying goodbye to something they really loved. And no series can really stick the landing absolutely perfectly, unless you're 6 Feet Under, which arguably is probably the best series finale of all time, in my opinion. No notes,
but okay.
10 out of 10. What would you say is the best series finale of all time?
MASH was pretty good.
I think MASH is definitely in there. It's definitely in those top ones.
I think the end of the original Fugitive with David Jansen was pretty great, and the fact that they actually ended the show, which was awesome. But again, that's, I don't know, 67 years ago, so a long time ago.
You get one a generation. If you look at how those are spread out, you get like one really great one a generation, it's difficult to do, and it's difficult to please so many different things. You're pleasing yourself, your cast, your audience, these days, your shareholders. Making sure that all bases are covered is really not that easy. So I went into this season expecting to have some disappointment at the end, and I would say what's great is that amount was less than I was expecting it to be, that disappointment. So I that's a net positive, wouldn't you say?
Okay, so you're rewarding it for not sucking.
Correct.
Well done.
They get a gold star.
Right.
Sorry, a silver. We'll say silver. A little tarnished silver star for not sucking. So yeah. So that being said, we're going to move directly into our coverage of the episode and our individual points. Before we do that, let's remind ourselves of the episode description for the season and series finale, episode 8. And then we'll get into writer and director, which is definitely somebody totally new and different.
It is.
So let's talk episode description first. So Steve, take it away for us, would you?
All right. Well, again, this is the Netflix series Stranger Things, and we are covering season 5, episode 8. And as you already said, the title is Chapter 8, The Right Side Up. And I don't think that's how they like their eggs. I'm just going to throw that out there. So, and the description that we have is as follows. Our heroes prepare to fight Vecna as he plans to end the world as we know it, and he feels fine. Meanwhile, in Vecna's mind, the kids are racing to escape. And that is your episode description. And, I suppose it doesn't really mention any of the, what happened after. But okay, good job.
They didn't want to give it away, I'm sure. And everyone lived happily ever after, the end.
Except Callie.
Well, yeah. Writer and director? Have we heard of these guys before?
Yeah, they decided to go with a duo for both writing and directing, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's the Dufay brothers. Is that it?
Dufay?
No, it's
Dufay?
Dufay. Yeah, Phoebe Dufay. It's the Duffers, right? Was there any doubt that they were going to write and helm the series finale of their creation? Of course they were, and so they did. And I believe for this season of 8 episodes, they are directed at least 4. I mean, I think it might be 5 of the 8 episodes. They were, either solely credited with directing or they were doubly credited with somebody else, so lots and lots of direct input for them, and they wrote a big obvious, I'm sure they had a hand in writing all of the episodes, but there are multiple ones, again, I think it's 4 or 5 where they are directly and solely credited with writing. So yeah, and we've talked about them before, so we're all familiar with the amazing stuff that they have done. And so that is your writer and your director.
So let's get started. I really think we're probably going to end up being a little all over the place because it's not like if we forget to talk about it, we could talk about this next week when we talk about the next episode because there is no more. And
Wait, what? There's no more?
I don't know if you got the memo, but this is the finale.
Oh, I know, but I mean, there'll be like another season,
No, it's
right?
the series finale.
Wait, so like the whole thing about he's hiding in Holly's mind and he's gonna start over and rebuild everything. That's not
Yes.
happening. Oh man, why is it that I always make that stuff up?
Man. So bear with us, folks. You know we're normally long in the tooth anyway, and we did our best to stick to our 5 points, but we didn't really do that very well for this one. But apologies. Would rather ask for forgiveness than permission. So here we are. Let's start out with our number ones. My number one. I loved the moment when they're already knee deep in the plans for the Vecna takedown, and there's this great moment where Murray gets on the walkie-talkie and he confirms what he can see above him. Murray is up on the top of the lab, the Hawkins lab, but in the upside down. So the upside down version of the Hawkins lab, with all the melty stuff on the roof.
The melty stuff
Yeah,
and the
melty stuff
vines,
and
yeah.
the vines. And he says he can see up above that the Earth is sort of the other planet is collecting the upside down, which is, if you remember from the drawing last week, it is more of a wormhole than an actual world. So it's coming closer and coming closer, and he sees it and confirms it and says to Hop over the walkie-talkie, and I quote, "Good news, bad news. The good news? Our theory was correct. There's a giant planet descending on our heads. The bad news? Our theory was correct, and there's a giant planet descending on our heads." And I thought that really sort of sums up so much about the battle, their plans. Everything is very good news, bad news, and it's very exactly the same way as Murray described it. The good news is that they end up being right about almost everything except for the mind flayer thing at the end. And the bad news is that they end up being right about almost everything except for the mind flayer thing at the end. So it really sort of sets you up for what they're gonna have for the rest of this battle, as it were, this final battle. So yeah, I thought that was a great way to start things off with Murray there. So yeah, let's jump into your number one then.
All right, yeah, and I agree. I thought that opening was really fun. It was kind of a neat, and it's kind of like, I mean, Murray obviously has another kind of standout moment later on in the battle portion of the story that it made one of my points. So we'll talk about it later. But it's just fun because Hop is down. I think they're like in the basement of that building because that's where the tank is. And so to allow Elle to slip back into Henry's mind, and of course she's going to drag Collie and Max along with her to go rescue the kids, right, and get them out of Henry's mind. So she needs to do the whole water thing, the whole sensory deprivation type thing. So they're down there, and of course Murray's up on the top, and I think he's like wiring up the turntable with the explosives and all that stuff, and that's when he sees it, and it's just a real fun little moment there. So yeah, I agree with you. It was really cool. And so my first point actually goes a little bit further after that because Elle does, is able to click into Henry's mind. And so the three of them are in there and they, literally they're like back in the high school from like the 1950s or the 60s that we've seen previously. And young Joyce is there with bad CGI to get there. Are you still there? Hello?
I'm here. You dropped out for like a hot second.
Okay. Yeah, okay, good. Because all of a sudden I was hearing, like the re-ringing.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I was saying was, they're giving her some crap because she's like, it's gonna take a second for me to navigate through here, because she's like, it's kind of like a maze and there's shortcuts and long ways, and they're like, we don't have time. We don't have time for this. Okay, and so they eventually work back there, and so they finally get back to Henry's house where all the kids are, and Max, they wake the kids up from their weird trance-like thing, and I don't know, doesn't Elle pick up Henry and throw him outside or across the room, so it kind of gets him away from the kids, and they're kind of having their showdown, and all the kids are freaking out, and they're like, it's the monster, and Max is like, I'm not the monster, and I can prove it. It's great, because then we see what she means play out just a few minutes later, and it's all because of Kali and her special ability. Right. So yeah, so I thought that was really cool that they're all like, oh no, it's the monster, and she's like, wrongo.
So in the interest of trying to stay a little more in chronological order, my next point isn't for quite a little bit, so let's stick with your points too, because your next point is sort of like at the tail end of that same Henry scene, where we have basically this is a really quick operation to try and, they want to disarm Henry, try and kill him, but also their other purpose is to get the kids out. So they do that, they get the kids out, but Henry does come back to try and fight them.
Yeah. So, like I said, Elle kind of, picks him up with her mind and flips him out of the dining room, right? Because they're all sitting around the table, and they all have the weird trance thing going on and stuff. And so Henry and Elle are kind of staring each other down. And when he kind of finishes, kind of knocks her down or something, he turns back to where the kids are, and the room is empty.
Right.
And so then he's like, because he's thinking that Max and Kali, and I don't even know if he saw Kali, but he's thinking that the kids have all run off, that they're no longer in that room. But as we find out, it turns out that Kali is just using her power to kind of put up a little, fake reality there, and they're hiding behind this cloak of an empty room. All the kids are there watching him, and then Elle uses, basically gets him to talk his way, monologue his way into admitting that he's the bad guy. And I believe he also turns one of his hands into all the viney things too, which is really not going to win you a lot of points.
That was a great one, because as soon as he did that, I mean, you could have explained away any of the things he was saying. If you look at it with a critical eye, is he just fighting for the kids in that moment with Elle when they're, revealing everything. But then when he rolls his sleeves up, and then as soon as his hand starts to, I'm like, oh yeah, that's not going to end well for him.
No, yeah, that was a mistake.
Yeah, and the kids immediately are like, oh God, no.
Yeah, like, oh crap. Yeah. And so, again, the battle kind of continues a little bit, and Elle eventually flings him back, and he lands on the table on his back. And as soon as that happens, Kali just jumps out of nowhere, and gets right on top of him, and she has this Michael Myers starter knife in her hand.
Yep.
And it's so great because she's like, hello, brother, and then she just brings it right down right in the center of his chest, and just as she's slamming it in there, it's just he's gone.
Right.
And he literally teleports away at the last possible second, so the knife is just sticking in the table, and Kali's like, uh-oh. yeah, and they're like, shit, we missed him, what do we do? And so it's really interesting, because their plan, the kids' plan, the party, let's just call them the party,
Yeah.
shall we? The party's plan, it's like multi-pronged, and already like this part of it is not going the way it's supposed to,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that everyone else was counting on them being able to, either kill or really, really injure Henry in his mind, like the mental version of him,
Right.
because that'll weaken him in the real world, so that when they get to where he is in the other realm, in the other planet, he will be easier to deal with. And so right away, it's like, uh-oh.
Yeah, and it's two-pronged too. Like they're trying to kill or weaken Henry in the mind, but they're also trying to stop the connection from that little seance he was doing with them. Was they were channeling all their energy toward getting that planet to move closer and closer, so they needed to interrupt that and stop it from happening, and then also create, you know what I mean? So it was like they needed to be able to stop the planet and do the other thing, and it was just like they were, and structurally that wasn't working, then you had this wasn't 100% working, and then she drops the knife in, and you're like, well, crap, this is not going the way we wanted it to, but it's also not failing. It's just sort of like I was saying, it's sort of like they were coming up to a red light and it's bad, but here's a green light, we'll do this instead,
Yeah.
So that's,
it's like they're taking just a slightly different route to still hopefully get to the right destination. Yeah. And I think too, like part of their hope of Dustin's theory of this whole thing is that if they can get all or some of the kids away from him, that will stop the two worlds from coming together.
Right.
And that's kind of a point before that, because all the rest of the party they're in the Upside Down, and they're over at the Upside Down radio station, and they climb up the antenna.
Right.
And like the only people that are in the right side up are Mr. Clark and the sister, whatever
Erica.
her name is,
Yeah.
Erica. And then at the radio station you have Max, because she's still in the wheelchair. She really can't move because coma for like 2 years or whatever. And then Robin's girlfriend is Vicky.
Yes, Vicky.
Is that her name? Yeah, and that's it. Everybody else is in the Upside Down getting ready to go. And so they're all at the radio station, they're climbing up, and there's some great stuff, but with Steve and Jonathan and all these things. And yet they get up there, and then they realize that the opening isn't lining up with the antenna. And then they're like, well, what are we going to do? And then so it's like they got to, the other group that's in Henry's mind, they got to hurry up and stop those kids, because otherwise we're going to get crazy. So you're like, oh my God. And so it's funny because the antenna kind of like bends a little, and gets damaged, shall we just say?
Oh
right?
Yeah.
So, but again, like you said, it doesn't go off like without a hitch, but it still succeeds enough that they're able to make their way into the other world and so on. But anyway, I just love that moment when I mean, clearly Elle and Kali and Max had planned out, this is what we're gonna do. Is that Elle's gonna get Henry occupied and distracted. Kali's gonna throw up this vision of the room is empty, so that the kids can see Henry kind of hang himself with proving he's the bad guy. And then on top of it, after that is over, they're gonna hit Henry in a way that will give Kali the opportunity for the death blow, and it like just about works. I mean, she did not monologue all that much, right? I mean, all she said was "hello, brother," and then brings the knife down. But even that was too much, right? That little moment of her little self-satisfaction was too much, and he gets away. I just thought it was a really cool sequence.
Very cool. Very cool. And we get it's tough because in order to keep the conversation flowing and know where we're jumping from point to point, we did the best we could to not include everything that was great, But in order to jump from that point to our next point, which I think chronologically is yours, the explanation of they have to come up with this other way of getting to Henry, because meanwhile, while they're doing all of this, Henry, when he retreats, plays a little game of like Presto Changeo with Hopper, and he does exactly what Will was saying he was going to do. Is he preys on the most painful memories, and he makes you feel ashamed or makes you feel scared, and he trots out the stuff about Sarah and losing his daughter, and how all of that stuff is terrible and whatever, and he gets so angry and he shoots at Henry. Henry makes it seem like he injured Elle, and
not injured,
that he killed her, pretty much
killed her,
and he's and so he breaks her out of the bath. And in essence, by breaking that connection, they leave Henry's mind. So there's this great moment when they sort of, disintegrate. It's, Elle, Kali, and then Max. And Holly and the kids watch them sort of, disintegrate in thin air right in front of them, because they leave Henry's mind, because the connection is lost. And so the kids are sort of left to fend for themselves, which is sort of a separate thing. But now Elle lets Hop know that Henry was basically like just fucking with his mind, and like nothing was real that he saw. So now they've got to figure out something else to do. And so they're trying to plan a way for Elle to get to where everybody else is, so that she can fight Henry there, like get up to, I'm literally like physically pointing up and realize no one can see me because this is an audio podcast. So she's trying to figure out ways to get up to this new planet, this new world, which is where all of our other team is. And they're trying to find Henry and try and find the kids. She wants to try and join them up there, but they're trying to figure out how to do that. And when they do, while they're trying to figure this out, the little pesky army guys come, and it's that dude that they interrogated, who gets a little... he sees them all show up at the lab and doesn't call it in to Dr. K, which actually helps them in the long run. He's a little crazy, and he's like, nah, she always sticks her nose in and da-da-da and takes stuff over.
She just wants the girl.
Yeah. And he's like out for revenge and wants to kill them all.
He wants payback. Yeah. He's like, and, there's no capturing with him at this point. Yeah.
So they show up, and they end up in this small battle, because he's there with probably, I might say, about 10 other guys, maybe at the most. It's a small group, but it's more than them, and they've got like rifles and automatic weapons and whatever. But the worst,
they have some of the devices.
They do.
Whatever we were calling those things.
Yeah, that hedgehog thing, the anti-L device, as it were.
Yes.
And what's interesting is it's like a two-prong attack. They're inside the building, and they're trying to. Hop actually took, when they started using the thing, the little anti-L ray, as it were. Elle and Kali are immediately like in pain and whatever. And Hop grabs Elle and puts her someplace else. And he's coming back to go, I certainly hope, to try and help Kali. It seems like he is. And the soldiers come upon them. And there's this little battle, etc. It ensues. And they are trying to find out where Elle is. And they're like, you gotta tell us where she is. They're like, I don't know what you're talking about. They're playing stupid. Meanwhile, the thing is coming in, this ray, this anti-L thing or whatever, and it's outside the building because it's in a helicopter. and it's sort of shooting from the outside so they can sort of cover this wide swath of area. And it's working because neither one of them are able to do anything in the moment. But it sets up this really tense moment where he's got a gun on Kali, he's gonna shoot her, and then it leads right into your point there.
Yeah, and this is what I would kind of tease there a little earlier, that Murray kind of has another little moment, although it's a big moment, I guess. Because as you said, he's up on the roof, and he's getting the whole thing ready, this whole kind of like bomb that they're building to destroy the wormhole, and they're setting it up, all the explosives up on the roof, because that's where that dark matter is that Nancy shot several episodes ago. And so Dustin has figured out that that's like kind of the optimal place to try and blow it up, right?
Correct.
That where it will, you could really cause it to rupture and cause the wormhole to destroy itself and close. And so he's up there, and I kind of think that the Army guys kind of missed that he was up there. And so they are focusing solely on Hop and the two girls. And to be fair, Hopper like gets into a firefight with them, right? Yes. And shoots a bunch of them and so on. And it's just a couple of guys and the main guy, the guy that was interrogated by Elle, that's left. And they, Hop kind of has the upper hand there, and Elle is there, and they're going to use their powers. And then, like you said, the helicopter shows up, and now suddenly it's just Hop, and now things kind of change. And literally that guy is like, tell me, where, what's going on. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, where's Elle? Because he gets Elle out of there, right? And he's like, I don't know. And then literally the guy's like, I'm going to kill her. I'm going to kill Kali, right?
Right.
And to Hop's credit, because let's be honest, Hop kind of wants her dead anyway.
Yeah, it's no skin off of his neck.
Yeah, so he's sort of like, you know what? I'm really not attached to this one, so you go ahead and do what you got to do. But he's like literally not going to tell him. And then right when that's going on, of course, up on the roof, Murray he sees what's going on. He sees them roll up. He sees the Hummer show up. He knows the helicopter's there and everything. And so he like literally looks around, and there's all these like bomb parts, and things. And he's like, crap. And then he starts like making this kind of makeshift thing with like a bit of C4 and a grenade and something else that he wraps it all up in tape and stuff. And then, he pulls the pin on the grenade, and then he, does this like perfect, like Olympics worthy, shot put toss.
Yes.
And not only is it a perfect toss in that it goes the exact distance before it starts to fall, so it'll hit the helicopter, but it also, he times it just right with the fuse of the grenade that literally the device falls, and it slips between the whirling blades.
Oh yeah.
Right. So it doesn't get hit by the helicopter blades and get, swatted away. And then while it's underneath the blades but above the top of the helicopter, that's when it detonates. And boom, like the helicopter's gone. So then now suddenly the Hedgehog is off.
Yes.
And while that explosion, it blows out all the windows, so all the Army guys are kind of thrown forward. Hop is thrown forward. It throws off the guy's aim so that he still shoots, but he ends up not following our mantra, because he was aiming for the head at first, so he doesn't quite shoot her in the head. And then it's great because Elle then shows up, and she, wipes out all the soldiers. And then when that guy's left, and I got to ask you about this. Did this seem a little, I was going to say hardcore? Like, granted, that guy was not the greatest guy ever, but, did he really deserve this ending? Because she makes him put the gun right under his chin and then blow his brains out. And I was kind of like, that's harsh.
I struggled with that one, because I was like, she's never done. But the thing is like she literally laid waste to all the other. She killed all the other soldiers.
Look, not just her, but like the kids in general. They have no problem killing army guys,
Right?
Because when they broke in to drive the truck through the opening, Nancy shot and killed.
Yeah.
What, 5 or 6 guards without blinking, and it's sort of like, guys, these guys are, I mean, yes, they're against you, but they're not really your enemy here,
right.
So
they're following orders
I,
kind of thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and so I wanted to get your take on that, because that, I mean, what she does to him, and certainly you could have the context of he had it coming, but that's pretty brutal for what is supposed to be like a 15-year-old kid do.
Yeah, I struggled with that, and I think in the moment, I think even if you discount all the other stuff he'd done leading up to that, the ultimate thing is if she hadn't intervened, if there'd been no intervention, what she did to him, he was just about to do to an innocent person. So I think she was just, and I think the way she did it was, I think if she had just, cracked his neck anyway, but I think the making him put the gun, that was the part that was more like a taste of your own medicine. The actual pulling the trigger was harsh, and I still don't know how I feel about that, because I think the aiming of the gun is where she really got the revenge on, like, this is what it feels like, this is what you just did. So I don't know. I was okay with the aiming, the gunshot. I don't know. It was very harsh. And
it was.
And,
I mean, yeah.
And like we were saying, like leading up to now, all of the deaths that have happened have been like, neck crack. So it's like they've got less of a violence to them. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, oh, I'm just putting them all to sleep. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's not. Those are they're painless and instantaneous, and she made him suffer.
Right.
Because there's a good 3 or 4 seconds where the gun slowly comes up to underneath his chin, and then she lets it linger there for a second, and then bang. Then she makes his finger pull the trigger. So he has that time to like contemplate, holy crap, whereas when she just shows up and kind of flicks her wrist and one soldier number 3's head just goes and he's dead. It's much quicker, and I don't know if it's painless or not. You assume it's painless because he's just gone, but with that guy, I mean, that was much more. I thought it was very intense, and it just in general, I was surprised that there wasn't ever any thought of, we're just gonna disarm the soldiers, we're gonna knock them out, and then we're gonna, do what we can to save them, throw them in the back of the truck, tie them up and drive them back. I mean, there was no one even brought that up as a, hey, do we really want to have to kill everybody? It was just sort of like, nope, kill them all. Okay. And so they did. So yeah, I thought that was very harsh.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Murray did.
But
go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say the Murray thing was awesome, though. The way he kind of stepped up and had that kind of like saves the day moment, because I mean it was not looking good, right? Because you get the sense that soldier was gonna shoot Collie, kill her, then shoot Hop, kill him, and then let's the other girl's got to be around here somewhere, and as long as we have the device running, she's not a threat. Let's find her and kill her too.
Right.
But we should point out that when the windows blow out and his aim is thrown off, he still ends up putting a bullet right into Collie's like chest or maybe her belly.
Yeah.
Right. So she is not in a good way. It's not like she escaped unscathed there. So
right, exactly. And we'll revisit that when we get to sort of like the epilogue, so we can talk through some of that. So
and I just also I wanted to go back to something that you said that and I thought this was just a really great piece of writing on the Duffers, in that part of the party's plan was to go into Henry's mind and mess with him in there. And I thought it was great that Henry responded by going into Hopper's mind and messing with him,
Right.
to stop them, right? Because, like you said, once and I mean, first of all, the fact that his cancer daughter is there and she's telling him that Elle's gonna die and you can't save her either. I mean, just all those cruel things that this girl. I mean, and he's just like, oh, you know what I mean? And then like you said, he shoots and he thinks he's shooting at Henry and he shoots and then he sees the water kind of running out of the tank, and then he opens up the door that's covering it up and the hatch, and there she is, and she's dead. She's been shot like 4 times, and then he starts smashing open the glass, and then back in Henry's mind they can hear him banging on it, and they're like, wait, I thought he already gave the signal, and she's like, this is something else. I mean, Elle is like, nope, this is not part of the plan at all. And then, like you said, once she is brought out of the tank and is out of that environment, then suddenly, boop, 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 they just blink out of the Henry's dream world. I thought that was a really cool sequence, how they wrote that in, and just had Henry kind of go, oh, okay, you want to literally play mind games? Cool, let's do that. And then he does. I thought that was neat.
Yeah, very cool. So next up on the list of things, talking a little bit, taking your point to talk about Henry, to get there, we go back to Holly and the kids. They're hiding in the cave. But all of a sudden, Henry understands this is it. I'm at my last bit, because he knows the significance of the day. He knows that he's got this plan in motion, and in order to get these kids back to be able to continue with his plan, he has to go into that cave. And so
he does.
And so he follows them in there. And when Holly realizes that he's attempting to overcome whatever this thing is in his memory, in his past, and he's coming, she knows that she's got to take the kids elsewhere. So they head off out of the cave and back out into like that sort of open area where she was with Max before, and brings them over to the mine shaft that they ended up in before. And that was a hilarious scene, because I liked the difference. I didn't include it in any of my notes, but I love how in this final sequence of things, Holly really becomes the Holly the heroic. She's like, now that those 3 are gone, I have to follow when she's like, let's follow the plan. We go to the cave, we'll be saved there. Follow me. And they go. And then when they have to go to the mine shaft, follow me. They get down to the bottom, and she's like, all eyes on me. Nothing in here can hurt you. It's not real. And then when Derek's like, holy shit balls, she's like, Derek, eyes on me. Eyes on me.
Eyes on me.
It was just the way that she sort of came into her own and knew, because she was worried about that before, when she was like, I was in these moments and I wasn't Holly the heroic. And Max is like, you will the next time, and this is the next time, and she's doing it. She even thinks of that when they get to the end and she's sending them into that other part of Henry's mind through the little rock wall there, and sends them into there. She sees the fire poker that she had from before, that she ended up not using because she was so scared, and it's still laying there from before, and she's like, this is it. This is my opportunity to make a difference. And she does a little bit. She slows Henry down.
Oh, she puts a big scar right across his cheek.
She sure does. It's fantastic. But what's great about it is we get this whole sequence where we learn finally like how Henry came to be. And what's great is, at the same time that this is playing out in the mine, Will is with everybody else who's up on the new planetary area, and he has tapped into Henry's mind. So he is seeing everything that Henry is seeing in this memory. So he's watching this I mean, for lack of a better term, it's Henry's backstory of how he became powerful and how he got his powers and how they came into his life. And what did you think of it as an explanation? The mysterious rock, which has some sort of substance, and it enters into his skin because he's got the hole in
his hand. It's part of the mind flayer, basically, right? Because once it starts going into his into his system, he's absorbing it or whatever. You hear the mind flayer, say, "Find me," or whatever, right? So literally, they're linking up, and I this was one of my points, and that is I was genuinely surprised, and I actually really enjoyed, this is probably one of the greatest moments of this whole season for me, was that sequence with Henry, in that the way Henry has been portrayed up to this point, he clearly is the bad guy. Right. And there's nothing redeeming about him at all. He's just evil, right? He's just mean, right? He kills all of those kids in the institute and burns their eyeballs out, right? And left them in the rainbow room, and he's just bad. Killed his family, all that stuff, right?
Right.
And there's no way you could ever have any sympathy for him the way he is portrayed. And then this scene happens and you feel sorry for him. And you find out, just like Will, it's great. Will's kind of channeling the audience when he points out to Henry, look, you were just like me. I was just like you. You were an innocent kid that got sucked into this thing, and were made to do this, and it wasn't your choice. So don't. And literally, he pleads with Henry, don't give in. Don't fight back. You can still overcome this thing. And of course, then Henry kind of shoots that down and says, I chose this and all that stuff. But just the fact that all that lead up to all the stuff we thought about Henry just being the monster at the end of the book, and then when that scene happens, you do feel sorry for him, because he was a normal, probably a little bit weird already, but still a normal kid when he went into that cave, when he was trying to help that guy. That's why he went in there,
right.
And then, he, first of all, he has to kill that dude with a rock, which, oh my God, would that be traumatic? I mean, how many years of therapy is that going to cost you,
Right.
And then on top of it, he opens up the briefcase, and there's the, magic rock, and then it gets sucked into him, and suddenly now he's, evil, bringing on the end of the world. And yeah, I thought that was, again, it was a really bit of I thought, really good writing, to where I never thought I would ever have any sympathy to Henry in this entire show, and then I did. And that was, I thought, really amazing. What did you think about that moment?
I really liked how, and they towed the line of they made him sympathetic, and then they showed how Henry chose, to be part of the Mind Flayer's world. And what you could argue whether or not he was, was he really choosing, or was he manipulated into that choice? We don't know, because we're not in the Mind Flayer's mind. We only ever saw Henry's mind, and it was just for a little bit there. But I loved some of it too, visually. I loved the filming. That moment when Will is in his mind, Henry is there behind young Henry, and the dude on the ground shoots, and when he shoots, and young Henry's hand and older Henry's hand, they both react exactly the same way, and then they cut to Will, and Will has reacted the same way. So they're all feeling it. And the way they filmed it, the visual of Henry right behind young Henry, and, the way he, even as an adult, can't watch himself, kill this guy with the rock. It's just really done well. It really tugs at you. And I think, Will sees it, but doesn't isn't Holly there too? Oh no, he knocks her out because he throws her.
Yeah,
So she
yeah,
doesn't see
yeah.
any of this.
No.
But even so, it's just so strikingly done. And that moment in his, because he beats him with the rock, and you think he's dead, but he does like pop back up again because it's a movie and it's horror.
Yeah, and what does he say? Like, it'll eat you alive, or it'll consume you.
You have to resist. You have to resist, right? And then
yeah.
Henry with his hand, which has just been, infiltrated by the Mind Flayer, he literally reaches out to like almost shut the guy up, like puts his hand out, and he does the thing where he pops the eyeballs out and they squish and like the black eyes and whatever. And he is so horrified over what just happened. And it's incredible to see like because he doesn't become Henry like that we know, and I'm using air quotes here, until much later. It's this moment where he's still, young Henry. He's innocent, and it's now all over for him, and he's now on the path of where he's going to end up right now to the person that's standing right behind him, and it's just so sad to watch.
Yeah, and you're right. Like the close-ups that they give you of Jamie Campbell Bower, as he's like literally he's just reliving this horrifically, horribly painful memory, which now when you watch that sequence, you're like, oh yeah, I wouldn't go in that cave either.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No
It's
kidding.
just like, nope, not going in there, right? And but again, just just a great masterclass moment in acting, and just the way, I mean, you just can see the pain and the horror on adult Henry's face, and like the tears are just rolling down his face because he's reliving this just unbelievably horrible moment. On the plus side, though, he was able to go home that night and tell his parents he knows what he wants to do with his life. So that was cool.
Exactly. It's and it's important to have that kind of motivation.
It really is. You got to have some ideas early on of what do you think you're good at, and he thought destroying the world. Let's give it a try. So.
I find it interesting too that the hand he always used as his quote-unquote powerful hand when he was gonna like get your thoughts out of your head was always his left hand, which is the hand that got hit. It's the hand that was overcome by the Mind Flayer first. So it follows that whole track of it all comes down to like that same left hand. So I thought there was a really nice through line that it always be that one hand. So
yeah, I do too, and consistently, it's always that hand, and then you're like, oh, I get it.
It all makes sense now. Well, to a degree, some of it makes sense. I think what's great about that explanation that we get there, yes, the sympathetic thing, whatever, but also understanding that Henry didn't bring about everything that was happening, that it actually was the Mind Flayer that was in charge of pretty much everything. He was, it was pulling the strings, as it were. Yeah. But I'm curious, what did you think of the whole, it's a magical rock inside a case and it infiltrated him? Are you satisfied with that as a sort of like, this is how it happened kind of thing, and leaving it kind of mysterious?
I was okay with that. I knew, I just from my sci-fi background of watching countless hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of science fiction and stuff, reading science fiction-y stuff, and the fact that they'd established that Elle and Collie and all the rest of those kids, they got their powers from Henry and his blood. And so then the question is, well, how did Henry get his? So I knew there had to be something that zapped him. And what was it going to be? And I think the explanation they came up with is, worked. It worked for me. I didn't have any issues with it. Is it totally no? But it really didn't have to. And I like the fact that even before Matthew Modine's character started monkeying around with this whole thing, clearly the United States government had found that piece of rock or whatever it was, and were studying it and knew it had powers and abilities and energy in it, and they might have even known it was alive, as
Right.
an entity, and so they were like, hey, we have this thing. We should figure out how to make it into a weapon. That would be a good idea,
Right.
and it just kind of goes back to, something that Jeff Goldblum's character says in the original Jurassic Park. That is like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Right.
And,
Exactly.
and where is the morals and the ethics on the scientist's part, who are theorizing, hey, this weird rock thing that we found, it fell to Earth or popped through a wormhole or whatever, and it's here. We should really figure this thing out, because man, it's cool, where no one's like, are you sure that's a good idea? And so no, I had no problem with it. I thought it worked, and they explained just enough for me where I'm like, yeah, okay, I buy it. What about you? Did you want more? I guess that's what I'm hearing from you.
I think, you know what, and this is another instance of I wasn't satisfied the first time around, because I was like, that's it? It's a rock in the box. But the more, it's another one of those things with this season, that the more I marinated on it and watched it a couple more times, I'm like you. Like, it's enough to satisfy, and they left it mysterious enough to, I don't know, maybe do a
Prequel series?
A prequel series. You can sort of feel that happening.
Mm-hmm.
But it's enough so that if they did something where they explained it further, that'd be great. But they left it mysterious enough that I was okay with it. I think what I am still a little disappointed in is, I wish it looked a little different than what it was, and I don't know what that is, but I felt like the look of what it was, to me, was underwhelming. I felt like, but I'm glad that they actually showed it, like when he opens up the case, because I think in one of the flashbacks we see him open the case, but you don't see what's in there.
Yeah.
But for us to actually get the full thing and see what's inside the case, I was actually very surprised that they did that they actually were like, hey, here's what it is. This is the thing that did it, and we're not going to beat around the bush. It's this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was just expecting something else visually, but even so, it is what it is. It's a rock that had the powers. It's got the bits of the mind flayer in it. It got into him, and that's what it was.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it was like a supernatural explanation, because I didn't want it to be I was always just a strange kid, and it just,
grew
I don't
from
know where
there.
it came from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a very sort of Stephen King kind of, like, he's always been the strange kid in town kind of thing, which is how it had been playing so far. We got the who Henry was after all of the stuff with his family in the house, but we didn't get this little bit beforehand when he had the little moment, when he was out, with scouts or whatever. Yeah. So I liked it. I liked it. It was
Did you though?
It filled in enough gaps to make it to make the rest of the episode much more pleasant and made more sense. I think too, because we got a lot of new information in this episode, like the Henry was infiltrated by the mind flayer. The whole thing is the mind flayer. That stuff. There was some. It felt like there were a lot of things to sort of have your brain wrap around. Between that, the all of the sciencey stuff with the wormhole and the upside down, and they're gonna blow it up, and the planet is coming down, and all this other. It just. I think the first time through, I felt like I just couldn't wrap my brain around what was happening there. So I needed to like watch it multiple times to get all of these like sciencey explanations just clear in my head, and now they are, and I feel much better about it. And that's that.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, I agree with your point ultimately, that it's interesting that after all of this time where Henry has been, labeled as the bad guy, that they did a really good job of adding some sympathetic streaks, to him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
You
I do
actually
too.
feel bad for him a bit,
You
you know.
do. I mean, and you see at that moment that, he was just kind of an innocent. And the
Yeah.
difference is that, well, Will resisted and
Yeah.
fought. Henry, not only gave in, but like, basically said, yeah, sign me up, and so on.
Exactly.
And the only other thing I would add about, The Rock, and about how you were sort of like, yeah, that's all it is. You were kind of maybe expecting something, maybe I'm just going to use this word, bigger, perhaps, like, more powerful or more formidable
Eh,
or something. The only
yeah, I think so.
the only thing I would say is that maybe, for my money, what the Duffers are kind of saying to us is that look at where we are and how close
Right.
the world is to ending, and this is where it started. Really small and insignificant and
Mm,
unassuming. It's this little rock, and
yeah.
that from that little rock, boom, look where we are. Now the two worlds are colliding. You have this incredibly powerful being in Vecna Henry, and I mean, all that stuff. And it just, this kind of idea or concept of, evil, it always starts out very small, but, it has a tendency to grow and grow and grow, and get larger and larger and larger. And that's what I took from that when you see
Okay.
it. They open the briefcase, and what are you expecting? Who knows? Probably not that, though. And you're right, it
Right.
is. You're kind of like, oh, that's it. Wait, that's it. But then like, yeah, that is it. That's all it takes. And we go from there. So anyway, but
Yeah.
but very very valid point, though. What you
Mm,
said. So yeah.
yeah. And what's interesting is the sympathetic moment with Henry, where we realize, as we're saying, he didn't orchestrate all of this. He has been orchestrated. No matter what he says, he has definitely been used as a tool by the mind flayer to do all of these things that he's done. And so, right as we're getting that description of him, and it becomes clear that the mind flayer is the one who has been pulling all of the puppet strings this whole time, this whole time that we've been seeing this image of where Henry is as Vecna is this. I likened it to looking like a claw, like a, almost looking like his hand was this little, like, the hive mind, as it were. And it kind of looks like a hive, as it, just the shape of it is very interesting. And, our party is looking upon this while Will is having this moment and hearing all of this stuff about the mind flayer being the one who's ultimately in charge. And as it becomes clear, they all are like, oh my god, because it's almost like visually, if you're holding your hand and you sort of hold your fingers together, like almost like you're doing mwah, like chef's kiss, like you hold your fingers together, then those fingers open up. So the top of this whole hive, this whole structure opens up, and then it becomes clear that all of those, like, sort of tendrils that were there that looked like fingers or whatever, they come down in the opposite direction, and they are actually the legs of the mind flayer, who now drops his legs down almost like he's a spider, as it were. And I thought that visual transition, I never, in the time that we saw any of this, whether it was an image in Will's head or whether we saw, what it was, when our party came upon it and you see it from far or whatever, I never saw the mind flayer in that. And so when just thought it was a real ingenious way for them to transition from, it looked very Vecna-y in the one way it is presented, and then when it transitions into the mind flayer is just I just thought it was very, very interesting visually, that they did a great job with all of that. Thought it was super cool visual.
What? You didn't see that
What?
right away? Oh my God. Yeah. No, I didn't see that.
I'm
Yeah, yeah,
crazy.
yeah. How could you miss it, right? It's this big thing, right? Yeah. No, yeah, every time they showed that, structure, whatever you want to call it, I thought
Hmm.
it looked more to me like one of like Henry created it, and it looked like one of his hands, and all the things
Yeah,
are like,
that's what
you know what I
yeah.
mean. I never made the connection of that it's, like the legs of the body of this thing ever. No, no, no. So
Yeah. And if you look at it structurally, like story wise, your brain is like, oh, it looks kind of like Henry, what, as Vecna, like his sort of like when he's in Vecna form, like his sort of claw-like fingers, like held together
mhm.
like that. Then you think, oh, well, he's sort of, quote unquote, holding the kids in the palm of his
Right, yeah,
hand
yeah.
as you know what I mean, like that all structurally makes sense. So the reveal then makes it that much more, they're now in the heart of the mind flayer, which is, oh my god. When that becomes clear,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
crazy.
right. When it starts to like unfold, right, and
Yes, yes.
and go into like spider mode, let's call it, right? Yeah,
Yeah, yes.
certainly the party's like, wait, that wasn't on the whiteboard. Yeah, this was not part of the plan. What do we do? And
Right.
so yeah, it's a really cool moment, and we were talking about this earlier that the final battle, it's kind of quick. We're kind of, I think a lot of people are
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, that it was, they kind of just get in there and just kind of beat up on it and kill it, and it ends. And I think when you see how it starts like this, you're expecting something maybe a little bit more epic than what we got, because like you said, it's
Yeah.
just such a great reveal, and then you're like, oh wait, that isn't just like a structure, that's like,
Right.
that's the thing,
Yeah.
and
It's gonna come. It's
it's a lot.
alive.
But
It's
you know what, but when
alive.
you think about it, when we see like when Henry is like suspended up in the air and is like attached to it, right above him is like the heart that's beating all the time. So I should have been like,
Right.
I wonder why that's doing that.
Yeah.
Is that like the air conditioner in there? What does it do? And it's like, oh right, okay, I get it now. But we didn't. We just kind of went, no, Henry made that. That's just cool. That's good.
Right. And like in the end, when the final moment when it actually stops and it like sort of
Yeah,
calcifies, whatever, like in that moment when it stopped, I was like, son of a bitch. We were literally, he was underneath a beating
the
heart
whole
this whole
time,
time, and
right?
we're like,
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
happening? You know,
Yeah. Well,
dummies that we
I
are.
am sure that there are, just hundreds and hundreds of people on the interwebs that were like, nailed it, said that in episode
Nail.
2, but whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like when I saw Sixth Sense and figured it out right in the middle of it.
Yep, he's dead.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so it sort of unleash, like as it appears, like when the mind flayer reveals itself and its like tentacles sort of like crash down into the ground, which was just visually astounding. And you're like, dude, that's where the budget went for this season, was on the green screen and CGI they had to do to create that whole scene, which is amazing. And from that moment until the that is, this is the whole um the major uh uh I guess battle. It's the final battle, the final countdown, the final showdown, and it begins right there. As soon as like that first claw hits the ground, everybody's running, there's gunshots, fire, things, whatever, and they're from there on out, and then they have to put together a plan. How do we attack this thing? They see Elle there, and Elle jumps in. So yeah, so like our next points are about this final battle. Like the actual battle itself is just so epic, and like you said, and like I said, it does kind of go very well for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think too, one of the other things that helped was um, they attacked it in a way that they made sure they understood the mind flayer and the Henry are connected. They are the hive mind. I mean, the mind flayer runs the hive mind, but by injuring something that's a part of the hive mind, it injures the mind flayer. Is how I interpret it. So they're trying to defeat Henry, and in turn, the mind flayer, to end this whole thing. So it's like hurting each of them, sort of like if you hit one, it hurts the other, and if you hit the Mind Flayer, it hurts Henry. So it was like, by sort of tag teaming it, it helps. And ultimately, I really feel like that the final, like, death knell for Henry was the fact that Elle and Henry are pretty well matched with each other. And they could have gone on and on and on and on, but that little bit, that sort of, the little thumb on the scale that put it onto Elle's side was Will helping and being able to get in there and crack his, his arm, or do the whatever, those little things there were things that Elle couldn't accomplish, and they were able to do to take Henry out. Even though it moved quickly, even though it worked really well for them, it still was really exciting. I really thought that they were going to kill Nancy in that moment, especially because they'd had this really cute moment with the guys beforehand where they kind of came to grips with, thanks for helping me out. Oh, no, thanks for helping me out.
Sorry about this.
Shouldn't fight
sorry about when you went away and all that. Yeah, they kind of have that moment, and they both kind of, it's really because they both kind of tell each other that they're not into Nancy, or Nancy's not into either of them. It's, know what I mean? So their competition was stupid. But the best part is at the end when Jonathan goes, "I still don't like you," and Steven's like, "Oh,
Steve goes, I wouldn't have it any other way."
I thought that was that was a real fun moment for them. And I mean, I first of all, I gotta say, I am very surprised in you, my dear, that one of your points was not Nancy giving Mike the flare gun. I mean, come on, what is with you? Okay.
That was pretty
funny. Just he finally thinks he's got something, and then the guy's like, "Dude, it's a flare gun." He's like, "What?" But it ends up being really important because they're throwing all the balloons full of kerosene and the Molotov cocktails on the Mind Flayer, and he's then shooting the flares to ignite them. And it's like you said, it's all helping to weaken Henry in his fight against Elle. And you're right, when Will kind of finally steps in there, and guess Will gets it. I guess they really liked it when Will said, "I'm not afraid anymore," because that's basically all he says in this episode is, "I'm not afraid. Oh, by the way, did you know I'm not afraid?" And guess what? Me, not afraid. But he does, and you're right. Not only does he break his arm, he like rips it like off of him.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then you're right, and it's just like, oh wow. And of course, there's that power struggle going on where Elle's trying to push Vecna or Henry onto like one of those jagged like thorn spike things, and just personal interior decorating point. Here's an idea: don't put like these massive spiky things all over your house that could kill you at any moment. Hello.
Yeah, no bueno.
To talk about coming back to bite you in the ass. I mean, it's like, come on. But he's like getting pushed back, and he's getting pushed back and pushed back, and it's getting closer and closer, and you're like, almost there. And then Will steps in and really, like you said, just kind of weakens him just enough that she's able to, impale him into it, and he's, it's sticking out of him suddenly, and he's done for. And then the neat part is that once he receives that mortal wound, that severely weakens the Mind Flayer, right? And then the mind, you know what I mean? Because it's like, oh, you just lost half of your team or whatever, your ability, your power, and then they finish it off, and it collapses and all that, and yeah. So you're right. It goes by. It's very fast, and it seems to kind of go well for the party, and a little surprised that they didn't kill at least one of those kids. That somebody didn't get taken out, right? That
I did include that in my honorable mentions. That, I mean, obviously with the gunshot wound, Callie dies. I'm using air quotes.
Does she?
Because we'll talk about that later. But she,
but was she even shot? Maybe she just used her mind to make you think she was shot.
It's possible. Anything's possible. But if you go with that plan, if you go with that thing that Callie being shot was the only death, I'm really surprised. They teased us, with Steve hanging off the tower, and he gets grabbed. when he fell, I was like, oh my God, are they going to start off right away with someone falls? And it's, how do you go, like, if you had a really devastating death like that in the beginning, could you still go on and fight the battle? You know what I mean? Like, what would it do to Dustin?
Well,
and all
look,
all
let's
this
be
other
honest.
stuff?
What would it do to the fan base? I mean, you're talking about the coolest character on the entire damn show. You can't just that you can't walk away from that, okay?
Can't just get rid of
You
Steve.
can't. Look, you've tried for years.
You cannot get rid of Steve. And that at hour 1:21, that's the B-roll. You can't get rid of Steve. Yeah, I was very surprised at the low body count, especially considering how big of a scale it was. I don't think it's impossible that they beat the Mind Flayer because of sort of that, two-pronged battle between, Elle and Will fighting on the inside and fighting Henry, and everybody on the outside sort of, throwing everything they had at it, as it were. I still think it was possible, but what's interesting is that they did all of that and nobody was even injured. You know what I mean? There's a couple of like scrapes and bruises, but like you would think they would have at least had like someone fell and like broke their wrist, or like there's like nothing. No, they're completely unscathed.
Yeah.
Which is, I thought, was very interesting.
Well, it's funny.
Interesting.
What it reminded me of was the Walking Dead finale. That I think going into that show, which clearly that show much bloodier when it comes to main cast than this show was. But I think we were all like, wow, who's, we kind of like things had leaked. So we knew that Daryl was getting a spinoff, so he's going to live. And we knew that Michonne and Rick, who actually weren't in the finale because they'd already left the show by then, so they were probably okay as well, and we weren't going to have resolution about them. But other than that, a lot of those characters, you're like, man, they could all go, right? I mean, they who knows what's going to happen. And when it ended, I think it was just Rosita is the only one. And she got that weird, I got bit, and then I got to have dinner with everybody first, and all that. You know what I mean? And I remember us kind of like discussing that, like, really, that's it, that's all we got. So yeah, definitely a similar vibe to this one that you're like, really, like so Vecna, Henry, and the Mind Flayer couldn't kill one of these. Literally at the end, I almost expected Henry to be like, I would have gotten away with it if it hadn't been for you, despicable teens, right? I mean, it's very Scooby-Doo-ish at the end there, that they just kick his butt and they're all like, yep, we're all here, you missed us, So yeah,
right.
I when we get to the honorable mentions more, I definitely want to dive into the who actually died at the end of the show, because I think there's certainly a lot of potential. Well, wait a minute. So but.
So let's move on, but let's talk about your next point, your number 5, which I have. I have some thoughts on that too. So let's talk about yours.
So after he's Henry's impaled and you think he's dead, and then the Mind Flayer goes down, and of course they've been shooting it and burning it, and Jonathan has the flamethrower he's using on it, right? So they are beating it up, and then it kind of collapses in a heap, and it appears to be dead. And of course, inside the Mind Flayer, that's where all the kids are. That's where Elle is. And we should point out that Elle, she we don't actually see it, but she jumps on the falling pieces of the other world to get back up there, which is okay, you do that. But she does.
She used that jump training she had from before.
It really paid off, right? And there's that great moment where the Mind Flayer's kind of attacking them, and Nancy's trying to lead it into the ravine so that they can all get on top and on the sides of it to start, wailing on it. And then all of a sudden Mike sees that there's, in the distance, this little teeny Elle facing off against this 500-foot tall mind flayer thing, and you're kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, that mind flayer's in trouble, but
Oh,
so
yeah.
anyway, inside it, that's where all the kids are. That's where Elle's fighting Vecna. And so when after it kind of dies on the outside, they all go in there and they're freeing the kids and pulling the tubes out of their mouth, and all the black smoky stuff's coming out and they're recovering. And then like Henry coughs and moves. He's not he's like in the words of Princess Bride, he's like mostly dead. Mostly, and so they're all looking at him, and he's certainly getting ready to shuffle off the mortal coil. It's not like he's going to recover. And then Winona Ryder finally gets to do something in this episode, and she walks in there, and she comes right up to him, and he kind of looks at her, and think about it. This is the first time that she's really come face to face with him. She might have seen him when he showed up and killed all the army guys from a couple episodes ago. I think she was there, but this is like the first time in the whole history of the show where she gets to directly interact with the person that literally upended her life, right? And she pulls out the axe, the same one that she used to fight the Demogorgon in the barn. And she looks at him, and I just wrote the line down because she's like, "You forked with the wrong family," and then proceeds to decapitate him. And it's not like a clean one stroke kind of decapitation. It takes her a good 6-7 whacks, right? She Lizzie Borden's the crap out of him, and literally cuts his head off. And I always kind of wonder, do you think they took his head back as a trophy?
I don't know. Or some kind of we got to prove that we did this kind of thing. Like, yes, we did this. It's done.
Yeah. Well, it's just kind of funny because in the D&D universe, there is I think we talked about this before, there is a character called Vecna, which is why they picked the name. And Vecna is this old, very powerful, wizard that had died, and his body parts are like magical items, and you can find the hand of Vecna and the eye of Vecna and all these things. And so if you had your hand cut off and you had the hand of Vecna, you could hold it up to the stump where your hand used to be, and it'll grow onto it, and suddenly it moves, you can control it, and you get magical powers because it's now part of you. And I just kind of thought, I wonder if they're going to go that route where they're going to take parts of Vecna back, and then now you've got this again for a potential new series down the line. The next version of Linda Hamilton is out trying to recover all of the parts of Henry that were brought back or whatever. But yeah, I kind of like the fact that they let Joyce do it. I mean, there's so many candidates that certainly had a good argument for no, I want to do it, so so let's get to you. So obviously maybe Joyce wasn't your first choice, but please tell me, what was your thought when she comes up and chops him into pieces?
I just felt like up until that moment, she'd been kind of, for this final battle, she'd mostly just been standing beside Will's side. So it felt like, and yes, I understand, as you go through it and you see, it did upend all of Joyce's life, but as she did every whack of the axe, it showed, each person that was sort of surrounding them, and how, Henry, Vecna, Mind Flayer, all of this nonsense has affected each person individually in such a terrible way, pain and all of that. And, Holly is flashed back to when her mom was attacked by the Demogorgon, and, Lucas flashes back to Max with the bleeding eyes and holding her, and Dustin obviously flashes back to Eddie and all this other. So everybody has their little moment of pain that he has done. But I wasn't sure if storyline wise, if Joyce was the character that does the final takeout of Henry. I wasn't sure about that. I just wasn't sure style wise or story wise. I was wondering if like maybe Will would have had more weight because Will was the start of everything. Or do you make it be Holly because Holly was like the new generation of everything that had been going on, you know? Or yeah, you know, I'm not sure. I think Joyce doing it was fine. But I think that they could have gotten a lot of heft out of it being done by maybe someone you weren't expecting it to be. You know, maybe having it be Holly or Derek or, you know, something like that. I just wasn't sure. It doesn't ruin the ending for me, people. You know, I did like though as the scene, like the way the scene broke down though, with the showing us a clip of all of these terrible things that have happened to all these people, all these moments of loss that they've experienced because of Henry, and I thought that structuring it that way was very, very impactful. And it reminded you of stuff that you were like, oh yeah, that's right, they did deal with that. Oh, they did deal with that thing. They did deal with that thing. You know, so yeah, again, it didn't ruin it for me, and Joyce is certainly a fine choice. But since it was a story about the kids were the driving force of this story the whole time. It just felt like one of them, whether it was the first group of kids or maybe Holly or somebody from the new group of kids to do it. I think that to me that would have been more. It would have had a little bit more weight to it. I don't know, just me, just my feeling.
Okay, yeah. So yeah. You were thinking possibly doing like the Murder on the Orient Express kind of ending, where everybody comes up and grabs the axe and gets a whack.
Yeah, why not? If it was gonna take like 12 times, you might as well let all these people like go ahead, take a whack at him,
right?
And then you're able to expel all of this negative feeling about them out of their lives.
You could have way up her do it. You could have Nancy come in and get a good one in for Barb. I mean, there's so many people there that he wronged. So yeah, it would have been interesting. Yeah. It would have been interesting if they did it that way.
I did like, speaking of Barb, I liked that when Nancy was having thoughts of the things that were most painful, the Barb stuff is the thing she feels the most guilt and pain about all these years later.
Yeah.
I thought there was an interesting way to include Barb in the finale as well, which I thought was really cool for them to do that. Because you knew they were going to include Eddie and, him having all of his, sad thoughts about losing Eddie. But, you forget about Barb. And Barb was such a large part of that first season that it was cool that they revisited back to her. So our people persevere, of course, because the good guys always win.
Always. Just look at what's going on in real life.
Yeah, we're definitely lots of winning, as Charlie Sheen would say. And so they exit the Upside Down. They set the bomb, which was super cool. I thought it was.
It wasn't the Butthole Surfers.
It wasn't. They went with Prince. They went with Dove's Cry. It was really cool.
Well, they just put on side one of Purple Rain, but yeah.
Yeah. So the song is playing. They leave the Upside Down. There's really some great moments. There's some palling around in the back of the truck, and everybody's having these great like, oh my God, we did it, and everything's feeling very exciting and what have you. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, in the right side up, as it were, Dr. K has been hard at work trying to figure out where our party is and what they're doing. And it took her some investigating, but she figured it out. They made it to the Squawk, and they made it to... It was cool because they cleaned everything up, but they left their notes on the overhead projector. Mm-hmm. And it was cute because when they found it, they were like, oh, look, they left their homework behind. And you saw all of their plans. They had everything written out for their plans for that night, everything they did. And so they headed right over to the Mac Z over by the entrance, and they literally just like were right at the entrance. They set up like those the teeth that break the tires when you ride across them and whatever. So they're all like high on life, and they're like, hey, we're leaving the Upside Down, and in about 3.2 minutes it'll be gone, and we're victorious. And they run right across
Winning.
the tire breakers. Yeah, exactly. And the soldiers come out, and they're on the verge of being like taken into custody. Dr. K is there, and then in the midst of all of that, Mike is the one that realizes it first. He's like, where's Al? Where's 11? And they're all looking around, and you see that she is inside the door, inside the gate. She's just on the other side, and she's in the Upside Down. And there's this really great moment where Mike gets away from the soldier and starts running towards her, because they know the bomb is about to go off. So they understand the implication of what is happening right now. So he runs towards her and like kind of trips, but when he trips and falls, he's in her mind.
Or she's in his, one or the other.
Yeah, whichever one works. So he like trips and falls, and he's in the water, so he's in a mind. He's in a memory, not in real world. And they get this really cute moment, and there's this really nice scene between the two of them where she's sort of describing why she needs to do what she's doing. And she's clearly going to stay behind. That's what it sort of looks like. And she gets this really great sort of final scene with Mike, and you included a really great quote from that scene as your point number 6.
It's we've been hearing this possible resolution with Elle for several episodes now, really ever since Collie showed up. Damn that Collie. Right. Hop might have been right. Should have killed her when he had the chance, right?
Ooh, wow. Ooh.
Harsh, right? Yeah. But Collie has really just been whispering into Elle's ear that, hey, even if everything goes really, really great for us in this whole plan, and we kill Henry and we seal up the Upside Down, it's not going to be over for us, because as long as we're alive, the military is going to be looking for us. They're going to hunt us down because they want to make more, and
exactly.
Yeah. And so she's, Kali, much like her name, suggests with the Hindu religion, she's talking about death, and basically saying the only way we're going to get past this is if there's no chance for them to find us. And the only way that can happen is if we're dead. And so, she's really saying we should do this, go out with if we have to sacrifice stuff, whatever, but we should not walk away from this mission, from this what we're attempting to do. And so now we see Elle, and she's standing there, and you realize, oh, you know what, she's going to do it. She's going to follow through on this idea, because here we're seeing right there in real time, the military, if they get her, Dr. K is going to put her in the same setup that Collie was in, and be draining blood from her every day and injecting it into pregnant ladies and doing everything they can to recreate what Papa had done before. And it's just gonna and even if they kill K, right, and they kill all those soldiers, that just means that the army's gonna send more and a different doctor, and it's just never gonna end. It's never gonna end. So she pulls Mike into her mind, or she jumps into Mike's mind, and they're standing there, and she kind of explains all this to him, that like, look, I know you wanted this kind of happy ending, this sort of we live happily ever after, and then this kind of vague teenage dream of, we'll just go off somewhere and we'll get a house, and like I'll get a job and it'll totally work, and it's this sort of like are you really
Right.
thinking? You don't know how the world works and all that stuff, right? That we used to do when we were that age, and he was really believing this is what was going to happen, and that they were going to get to spend the rest of their lives together. And she's sort of like telling him, "I'm sorry, it's not going to work that way." And then she, basically, and he's, basically he's crying and saying, don't do this, don't do this. And she looks at him at one point, and she basically goes, from the moment we met, you've always seen me, the real me. And she thanks
Right.
him and tells him that she loves him. And again, if I had any sort of, not cold dead heart in me, it would have moved me to tears, but I didn't really care. But I'm sure a lot of folks out there were like, I'm not crying, you're crying,
This is so beautiful.
yeah, and it is, and it's a very heartfelt scene. And I think it shows off the masterclass of acting, because, if you believe the internet and the talk, these two people do not like each other in real life at all.
Nope.
So the fact that they're like kissing and holding each other close, I'm like, wow, they're really good actors, because they want to like punch each other in the face.
What they did was they took all of the feelings that they had about, I am so sad about not working anymore, but I'm gonna cry here because I'm so happy on the inside that I won't have to work with you ever again.
I never have to see you again after this scene. Yeah, right.
Right.
But yeah, and it's really sweet, because it's her way of like letting him go. Right.
Right.
And letting him know that, he means the world to her, and all that he did. And of course we get all these great flashbacks, to them when they, looked like they were the correct ages for these characters. And
Right.
like when she had the long hair and was wearing the dress from,
Yes.
like, either, I think it was in season 2 maybe.
Yeah, that
I
was
mean,
super
oh
cute.
my God, that scene, you're just like, oh,
Yeah.
it's very sweet. And then as quickly as he gets sucked into the mind moment, he's back out. And then, the Purple Rain finishes, and the circuit connects, and just like in Walking Dead, everything explodes, and in a big whoosh, she's gone.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and you're like, huh. And then,
Huh.
I mean, like, literally, I literally, it fades to black, and we go to like the last, I don't know, hour of the show. It's not like the show ends immediately. I think
Yeah.
it's very interesting that once she's gone, literally Dr. K and the army must have been like, all right, well, we're done here, let's go.
All right, pack it up.
Pack it
We're
up,
done.
people. We're out of here. And they just like left Hawkins in the the crap pile that it was. And like, you
Yeah.
guys can clean it up yourselves,
I thought what was interesting about the whole, like, because we'll get into like the epilogue of like how we feel about where Elle is really.
Mhm.
But I liked how the Duffers attempted in that moment to give it a finality of like this, because the opening that's been that way for 2 seasons or whatever, season and a half, the opening that is where the library is, and there's this big hole that they've been driving in and out of to be able to get in and out of the Upside Down, this gate, as it were. It's gone, and in its place is just like the busted parts of the library. So the Upside Down is gone, and it's literally just right side up. As soon as everything is sort of sucked away and blown away from it's like it clears the deck, as it were, because you can see as things are blowing away in the Upside Down, it's like, the house gets blown away, the radio tower gets blown away, little bits and pieces of their world get sucked away, and it just sort of clears the slate, and then you see, like, that's it. That's the end of it. The Upside Down is no more. It's gone.
Mhm.
I just thought visually that looked really cool to sort of just put a cap on, like, this is gone, and you can't ever access it ever again. I liked it. So that's the end of that section. And
Yeah.
then we get this whole epilogue, which is, it's in a couple of parts. And what's interesting is the they do the whole, they started out the season with Robin on the radio doing some exposition, and they end with Robin on the radio doing some exposition. So we're 18 months later, and it's graduation day at Hawkins High, and all of our party members are graduating, and it's this really interesting sort of way to close everything out, because it's the end of the series, it's the end of their schooling, which means the next step for them will be something that doesn't involve being in Hawkins anymore. So the real world and the Hawkins world are sort of mirroring each other right now. So they took the obvious choice, and they had everything line up with their graduation, which I thought was really interesting. And the valedictorian is Dustin,
Of course.
and he starts out with this really great speech, pulls everyone in, because he makes this whole point about how, we all pulled together, the jocks, the nerds, the people that you did, I ended up being friends with people I never thought I'd be friends with. And of course, camera to Steve Harrington, who's like, oh, that's my guy. And, Dustin has his whole speech, and then he, like, at the end says, but we got to be careful, because I can see they're going to slide back into the way they were before all of these troubles we had. And don't do that, like, squares, like, and as soon as he starts talking about the principal, people are like, oh no, he didn't. And then he's like, why do I even have on this? And he takes off his cap and gown thing, and it's underneath, he's got on a Hellfire shirt, of course, and he's like, yeah, this is, none of, this is our year. And he obviously has an Eddie moment. He does it in absolute, like, honor of Eddie, which I thought was really cute. Yeah. So we've got the graduation, and at the same time, like, on the same day, all of the adult guys meet up as well, and we get your point number 7 there, which is, I thought was hilarious, as they're all, like, talking through their new lives now. They're sort of scattered all over at this point.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that they, we kind of get the the party. It is split up into these different groups, right? Because you get the high school kids that are graduating, and then you get, like, all the kids that are, they're clearly not high school kids anymore. So like, I kind of sum it up as, you've got, like, the 25-year-olds that are graduating high school, and then you have the 30-year-olds that are playing 25-year-olds, and they all gather on the roof. And then after that, then you get the really old people with Joyce and Hop having dinner separate, right? And so it's real interesting how they kind of, and again, we never, Murray is just gone. We just don't, Murray just went up back to his weird little compound thing, and is living the conspiracy life, I guess, is what we're supposed to assume. But
no, he's right there. He's in the.
Is he with Erica, or sitting there?
He's sitting with Mr. Clark.
Okay, that's
actually.
where it is.
Snookums.
That's right. Okay, so anyway, but we don't really find out too much about him, is the point I'm trying to make.
No, we just see him visually.
And so anyway, I guess this is just a thing in Indiana, that if you just want to go up onto the roof of a radio station and just, like, hang out and drink beer, they let you. Not a problem. I mean, I know it was the 80s and things were a little bit more lax, but that seemed a little weird to me. But yeah, they're up there, and they're all kind of talking about what's going on, and you find out that, some of them are in New York, and Jonathan is making this movie, and you find out that Nancy's dropped out of college and is working at a newspaper, and all these things are going on. And of course, the coolest character in the show, Steve Harrington, he's become a baseball coach, and he's also, part of the responsibilities is he has to teach a class, and we find out he's teaching sex ed, and the rest of them are like, "Oh my God, are you kidding?" Like you're teaching sex ed. He's like, "Yeah," and he's like, "I'm teaching them, how to create life and not do it accidentally." And then at one point, Robin kind of looks at him and goes, "Well, if I had a question on an STD, you'd be the first person I'd come to." And he's like, "Thanks." So, and again, it's very fun, and you really get the sense that here are like four like platonic friends, right? That they're that and they kind of are commiserating and laughing, and they got a cooler up there, and they're drinking a few beers, and of course Steve is expounding on how beautiful the view is, and how could you ever want to leave this, and it's unfair that we don't get to we should do this more often, and they make this pledge that I think a lot of us remember doing at that age, where you're just out of high school and you're kind of hanging out with your high school friends, and you're like, "Man, we're gonna stay together forever," and right. Every year we're gonna come back to this spot, and we're gonna like have a cold drink and just like, reminisce and do all this stuff that we love doing, and then like real life intervenes, and after a while it might happen like a year or two, but it really never doesn't work.
Right. Right.
It's like body shots, it just doesn't work,
They just don't
yeah.
work. Yeah.
But it's a great kind of resolution where we get a little sense of what they've all been up to, and the fact that they've all kind of moved on and they're doing well in one way or another, and it's a fun scene, and the Robin STD line, it made me laugh, so I thought that was really cool.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah. What did you like that was what we got for those characters, or were you hoping for something else?
I think I was okay with it, because I think if they had ended up in each other's worlds like on a permanent basis, I think that would have seemed a little too like neatly tied up with a bow, and you don't want that. You want there to be like some surprisey stuff, and so we know that they both agreed that like they both love Nancy, but know that they aren't meant to be in a relationship with Nancy, and so they just are great friends and care about each other. I think if they had fallen back into, because I was like on the edge of my seat, are they going to be like, "Oh, I dropped out of school, I'm living with Jonathan in New York," or whatever. Yeah, they were right on the edge of doing that. They could have done it and they didn't, and I'm really glad that they did, because having all four of them have their own lives was so much more realistic with what happens. They all kind of needed something of their own, leaving Hawkins and sort of carving out their own life that had nothing to do with Hawkins. Also, it needed to give you an idea of what's going to happen to the rest of the party. They're going to do exactly the same thing. They're going to love everyone, move on by going to college, going to another city, and they're going to try their best to see each other often. I think that the Dustin and the Steve thing is the only thing that happens on a regular basis.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
And obviously Lucas and Max, that's clearly. But I think everyone else sort of carves out their little, place in the world, and they just, maybe they see each other, in town for Christmas or whatever. But that's it, and as it is, like Joyce and Hop are going to leave town too.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Will and Jonathan won't have any reason to come back to Hawkins anymore. So that cuts that out as well. So it's like, that's all stuff that happens in life. People do that. So I think that it was very, the only thing I thought was a little, I felt like having everybody doing what they were doing and being where they were was all very on the nose. Going to NYU for Jonathan, that's like, they could have said any college. It didn't, NYU is like really hard to get into, and you know what I mean? Like, and I don't remember Robin saying she was very good with grades. Smith is also very hard to get into. So I'm like, they're picking like the number one destinations and making it seem like, la-di-da, we just made
Yeah, but
it.
see what they didn't tell you is that the government like stepped in and like helped them out because, they obviously were debriefed by Dr. K, and when they explained how they saved the universe, they were given some like, you know what, we'll give you a really good letter of recommendation kind of thing. So,
yeah, that's possible.
But and also too, like the Hop and Joyce thing, right, where he lets her know that like I think it's Montauk has a opening of a new sheriff, and like a friend of his let him know, and he points out that if we move there, we're closer to the kids. So it's not so much that they're running out of Hawkins. It's like, no, they're moving to where they can spend more time with their kids and not have the distance be so great. So but I mean, you're right. They kind of get a lot of success, some of them where you're like, really, Jonathan, you're able to pull off getting into that school, because Jonathan in the first season does not really strike me, or I think anyone, as like a Rhodes Scholar. So yet you're right. And the same thing with Robin, I guess Robin's more of a wild card. We don't really know. I mean, she seems like she's kind of a screw up, but we don't know, for sure. At least I don't remember, them saying definitively one way or the other, she's a good student, she's a bad student. I just remember she was working in the summer with Steve. I mean, that's kind of how we're introduced to her, right? But you're right. And then the interesting thing is that the one kid that you kind of thought was smart, which is Nancy, she dropped out of school.
Right, exactly. And I do appreciate this, which is, out of all of those things, she's like, I took a job with the Herald. That's the starting. It's the Sun-Times of Boston. It's the New York Post of Boston. It's not the.
It's not the Wall Street Journal or.
No, it's if she was going to be someplace prestigious, it'd be at the Globe. That's like the Boston's version of the New York Times, or the Chicago Sun-Times,
or the Washington,
the Globe,
the Washington Post or whatever. Yeah.
She's so starting out at the Herald is a much more like, she's at the bottom of the heap. She's at the lesser of the two newspapers. She's in a starting position.
Doesn't she say it's like a trainee? I mean, it's like she's really starting at the bottom, So yeah.
But if it's what she wants to do, I think that's like very cool that they went that route. That she's sort of living her dream, as it were, doing what felt right to her rather than being in school. So I thought that part was cool.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, the realism of them not seeing each other very often and all of that, I think that's a good harbinger for exactly what's happened with our party, for sure.
Yeah.
So that being said, we get the final scene, which does two things. The final scene in the basement, it ends the story for all of the party members. And I like the way Mike told the story, where he gave each, the bard did this, and the sorcerer, Will the Wise did this, and whatever. So it was a nice sort of like, he did the storyteller version of whenever you have a movie or story that comes to an end, and then you have the credits roll, and it's like, these two ended up spending the rest of their lives together. These two had children and moved to da-da-da. You know what I mean? Like doing the written out. He said it out loud because he was the storyteller. I thought that was a really cool way to do the final nod to Stephen King, to have him be like the storyteller, continuing to tell stories, about his youth. He's going to write stories about stuff that happened to them and stuff that they did and what it was like to be that age and to have, crazy things happen to you. Maybe he's a fantasy writer and people are like, oh, these are crazy, and he's like, in his head he's like, yeah, this really happened, but whatever.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a really nice nod to Stephen King there at the end. And we'll get into the really big, like, what do you think? But I feel like as Mike goes up the stairs, I'm really convinced that actually, if you go through the whole story of this show, it's really Mike's story. The whole thing. Because he's the center of almost everything. And that he closes out the story really feels appropriate to me at the end. I don't know how you feel about that.
It's interesting. I never really would have thought that Mike was the central character, but yeah, I mean, he clearly is the dungeon master of the party, so he's the one that's creating the campaigns and narrating and kind of directing the rest of them, and asking them, what are you going to do? You come up to a door, what are you going to do? And all that you do when you role play like that. So it made sense that he would be the one to close out this story.
Right.
But what I thought was really interesting about that end scene is that they finish up the campaign, and of course, he tells the story about what he believed happened at that when the bomb went off. But when they finish, and we can talk about that because obviously that's a huge thing, right? It's
yes.
Like, what do we think happened? But then, we get that moment where all of them close up their binders and they put them on the shelf and they're all named, right? And they all do that. Yep. And then they all go up the stairs and he's the very last one and he goes up. And then as he's going up, Holly and some of her friends, including Derek, come down and sit down at the table, and they're going to start playing D&D. And yes. It's sort of like the passing of the torch.
I thought that was adorable.
Yeah, and even though like they don't, like, none of them know what they're doing, and like her one friend, I think it's the girl she whacked in the face with the boombox. She's like, "You told me this wouldn't be nerdy,"
Yeah, it's very nerdy. Yeah. Look at it, it's very nerdy.
Yeah. And but anyway, and he kind of watches them, and you kind of get this nostalgia sense that he's like seeing what imagining him and his friends 6-7 years ago when they first sat down and started doing that, and then that was really sweet. So I like that, and you're right, the fact that we do see him and he's typing later on, and you get the sense that he goes from being the dungeon master to the storyteller to the narrator to now I'm actually like an author and I'm writing these fantastic fantasy stories that a very, very small percentage of the population knows are based on fact, but everybody else are just like, wow, you're really screwed up with the shit you come up with,
Yes.
So and you're right. Definitely a Stephen King nod is there, with him, and just from a personal note, I this is just set design in his basement there in the far wall, there is a John Carpenter's Thing poster there, and I'm just like, just like in my apartment right now there's a John Carpenter Thing poster. So
as it should
be, right. So although I will point out that his is not signed by 5 cast members, but mine is. But anyway, that's me. I don't want to distract, but
it's neither here nor there.
It's neither here nor there. But anyway, let's get to it. All right,
let's get to it.
Yes, and we all know what we're talking about, and that is, how cool is Steve Harrington? No, it's not. That's a different it. It's let's get to the ending, and what do we think is the ending, and what do we think is not the ending? So I will throw the floor to you and say, please, ladies first.
Okay, so clearly we're talking about Mike's I believe moment and his explanation, and I have to say, and clearly everybody who's listening has watched, so they know exactly what we're talking about. So his explanation for where he thinks Elle really is, and I think I think I believe, because I've watched the episode a couple of times now, and the things that he points out later are things that they made a point of showing during, so that it's not like, I think it'd be different if he made a point of talking about like the hedgehog things at the end, and they didn't make a big deal of showing them in the scene when the scene was actually happening. But they did. They wanted you to see them so that when he recalled them, you'd go, yeah, that's right. That's right. And I don't know if that was just to sort of make people a little more apt to believe or sort of lead you to that area, but I don't know. The thing that I most watched when I rewatched was I watched Kali, because that, I think, is the linchpin of how this all works. Because the whole point is, if you go by what he says and you watch it, he doesn't actually hug Elle in real life. He hugs her and kisses her in her mind and in his mind. It's not. And why did it have to happen that way? Why couldn't they just have a physical moment? And she did that obviously to keep him safe, but if she needed to hide what she was actually doing. And when you watch Callie, I don't know if it's very conceivable that the gun, she either had like a small injury or whatever. I think that Kali was in the Upside Down when it blew, because that's what she wanted. But I think she stuck around long enough to help her sister get out of there. And because that's not what she wanted, but she did want to live a life of peace. And she helped her do that in the best way that she could, which was she used her powers one last time and helped Elle create this image of, I'm in the Upside Down when I'm really not. Also, if you watch, after Elle and Mike kiss and he like won't leave, he almost wants to like keep hanging on to her physically. She actually uses her powers and pushes him away. Because if you look, he doesn't fall. She does like a push, and he gets pushed out of her memory, out of her mind. Now, whether or not she did that or Callie did that, I'm not sure. But someone pushed him, and it was either her, and she was able to because they didn't have the hedgehogs turned on, or Callie did it because Callie was manipulating that whole moment there. I honestly think that it's very possible that happened, if only because I also don't think that people that create a cash cow aren't always thinking about, well, down the road, 5 years from now, we could do a, Stranger Things adults, or who the hell knows. And I think they'd have to pay millions of dollars to get these people to work together again, like we were talking about. But it also leaves the door open. And I think that most people like to leave the door open a little. And I think by believing in what Mike said, it leaves the door open for more. And even if we don't ever get any more, that's what they wanted to do. Yeah, I believe his story, because I think based on watching it multiple times, I think that everything he said is absolutely possible and would fall in line with everything that leading up to that moment, because she was hesitant. She didn't want to kill herself. She just was, feeling regretful towards the end. She didn't want to go through with what Kali wanted to do. So this was sort of like a best of both worlds. kind of situation. So I put it in there, and I said it at the time when it happened. I feel like from moment one, I felt like, yes, I believe. So how about you? What do you think of the explanation? Like, do you believe? Did you come to believe? Do you just reject it entirely?
Well, I think you're dead on when, the only way to effectively kill any character in Hollywood is to kill all of the movie producers in Hollywood. Because, if anyone figures out, hey, we can make some money by bringing a character back, suddenly it doesn't matter how they appeared to die in a previous movie. They're just there. They're back. And,
Right.
you're right around it, right? So I think, the old adage, never say never, is certainly in play here. Um, as far as what I think happened, um, my thought is that she's dead.
Okay.
And my thought is that the whole thing with Mike and her is Kali doing that. So she pulls Mike into the dream state, and she creates an image of Elle and has her say all these things, and it's a way for Mike to get a little closure because she wants to help her sister because she likes her sister.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's no way that Elle could have done that where she was, because as you pointed out, the hedgehogs are all running, they're all on, so there's no way. I'm sorry, she can't. It's been established, and again, this is where the producers and the sequels and things can say, well, there was a way she found to overpower it, but based on the rules of this particular series, she can't. Right? We've seen no way for her to use her powers when those things are turned on. So there's no way she can pull Mike into her mind. There isn't. Right?
Okay.
Would you agree to that?
See, but I thought that they weren't running. You know what I mean?
Oh
I
no,
thought the point
they
was
yeah.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Yeah.
No,
he has that moment when he has, like, he remembers it before we get to, like, the graduation scene even, and he remembers seeing, wait, she's there and she's, doing all of the stuff and her nose is bleeding, and then we see the hedgehogs, and then he kind of has that, wait, that shouldn't be that way. That's not
right.
how it works. So no, I at least that's how I took it, that the hedgehogs are all running. Dr. K is not, she may be stupid, but she's not dumb, and she certainly has them onto immobilizer. So as far as I'm concerned, the only person that can be creating any sort of magical or ability is Kali, because she's so far away. Right, that she's unaffected. So that my thought is that Elle is standing there on the other side, and just waiting for the end, and then it blows up, and then she's dead. And so this all of the stuff with Mike is just wishful thinking. But that's me, all right. That's
Right.
cold dead heart, right?
Right.
I love the downer endings anyway. So I loved his explanation. I loved how he did this kind of final campaign with his friends, where
Right.
literally they're like fighting out the end battle that they just fought, and then they, have, the mage shows up, and it's of course it's a female character, and it's supposed to be Elle, and he uses that to explain what he thinks happened. And of course, all of them, because they all loved Elle so much, and as much as they say they believe, it's more because they want to believe, because the alternative is just too damn depressing. So
Right.
of course, yeah. And we get the scene of her, and she's, hiking, and I don't know, wherever she is in Australia or New Zealand or somewhere where there's two waterfalls, right? Couldn't
Yeah.
find the three waterfalls, but
Yeah.
she finds the two. And you're supposed to believe that, okay, so like this like 15-year-old girl with like no ID at all is able to just like go live somewhere. Okay, sure. Yeah. Absolutely. It could happen. No. But that's the kind of the fairy tale ending that he paints
Yeah.
for her, because it's easier. That's my take on it, right? And I know there's a lot of debate. There is a ton of debate about what actually happened at the end, and is she alive? Is she not? And my guess is that the majority of people are going with a yes, that Kali fakes it, right? That we do get the scene where Kali tells her, hey, maybe there's another way, or she says something that's very cryptic to her when she's lying on the ground after
Mm-hmm.
she was shot. And like, maybe we can, we can do this in a way where the I guess the theory is that maybe they won't look for you if they think you're dead, right?
Right.
And so they come up with that. But here's the monkey in the wrench that I'm going to throw at you now, and that is my crazy ass, completely unjustified theory is when Murray throws the grenade and it blows up the helicopter, that immediately shuts off the hedgehogs. And
Right.
and it also blows Akers, which is the dude who she
Yes.
mind tortured. It throws off his aim when he shoots the gun. And my crazy ass theory is that he missed Kali entirely when he fired the gun.
Mm-hmm.
And she, in that moment, created the illusion that she was shot and bleeding out.
Yes, I think that that's possible. In rewatching it, I think that that's possible.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and when you see him and he's falling, where the gun's positioned when it fired, it looks to me like it would shoot like over her shoulder or her head and not
Right.
like in her chest. So so then once I saw it come up with that, cockamamie theory, then I go one step further that, Kali then is at full strength because she's not mortally wounded. She's not, dying in a puddle of blood back at the institute and all that. She's fine, and then she's able to generate this mass illusion at the end. So, to give Mike this sort of, idea of closure.
Right.
Anyway, that's what I came up with. But
Okay.
I think the cool thing about this is that there's just enough evidence and suggestion to support any crazy ass theory you want to throw of to what happened.
I think so too, and I think that to me, I feel like that inclusion of this sort of like I believe moment for everybody, whether you believe or you don't believe,
Mm-hmm.
I think that that was the only very fan servicey thing that they did was
Yeah.
that so that you could sort of it's choose your own adventure. It's whatever struck you a certain way is how you see it. And like your explanation, absolutely plausible. Is it possible? Absolutely. And I totally agree that that happening the way you think that it happened, absolutely possible. And I think that that's the other thing is they created something that really could sort of take away from it what they believe. No, I believe this, I believe that. But because they made it very plausible, it's not something that you could sit there and go, there's like I can't sit here and go, there's absolutely no way that what you said is possible. You have to concede. There's credence to your how you feel it ended,
Mm-hmm.
and it just I think that makes it a nice ending for people because people got from the ending what they wanted and needed in that moment. And how you saw it, how even without any of the supporting stuff with Kali and everything on my multiple viewings, from the very first time I watched it and I'm sitting there, in tears like the rest of the party, and I said out loud, I believe, and right away because that's where I was emotionally. So other people felt differently, and what's cool is they created this moment for the fans that's absolutely valid for every single person. What you like I said, you got what you needed in that moment, which I thought
Yeah.
was really cool.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So you also, so to round it all out, your last point you included there was the musical choice.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's this moment there where it's just you've commented on this in the past, and I think we all agree that the music for this series in general is amazing.
Oh yeah.
Particularly for folks of our generation who remember very vividly the music of that era.
Oh yeah.
It hits harder. But I know a lot of the younger kids also enjoyed it as well, which I thought was very cool. And there's a moment there where um, in the soundtrack they play like the beginning of a Cowboy Junkies song called Sweet Jane.
Hmm.
And it's just, again, it's just a wonderful choice because of course Elle's real name is Jane.
Hmm.
And so it's sort of referencing the fact that she's gone. And Sweet Jane, it's kind of a sad song, I would say. It's not a rocker, it's not
Right.
a real fast paced, energetic song. It's more of a ballad, a slower thing. And I just think it was a really cool choice that they inserted that in there, and it is era appropriate because I want to say that song came out in like 1987 or 1986 maybe. I didn't look it up, but I remember it being about that time when
Yeah.
it came out. So yeah, I thought that was really cool.
It's a really good choice of music.
Yeah.
All right, so that's our main points that we had, but we had some interesting honorable mentions. Um, so I'll just go through mine super quick. That I thought that it was really apropos that they had a couple of good throwbacks to the start of the series in this final episode. It's been happening for the whole season, but for this final episode, there's some big ones that stand out. Are Elle going into the tank, putting on that sort of underwater headgear, the breathable sort of headgear, and then going in there was so reminiscent of she spent so much time in that tank in some of the previous seasons, and definitely in the first season we see her flashbacking to all of that stuff. It's very reminiscent of previous stuff. So that was one that hit me. And also clearly the final D&D game was a really great throwback. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. We already talked about how how surprised about Kali being the only, death, if you even consider it that. But I think that she still decide whether she faked that gunshot or not. I think she chose to stay in the Upside Down.
Oh yeah, I do too.
And she's gone,
Yeah.
regardless whether the gunshot killed her and you think that's how she went, or you believe the ending, or
Yeah.
She's inside the Upside Down. We never see her again, so she's gone. So Kali's really the only, whether you believe Elle dies or not. I guess if you think Elle is dead, that's a significant death for sure, but I'm so surprised that no one else did. And people came close. I mean, look at, Karen Wheeler with all of her injuries, and I just was really thought that someone else from the party was going to go.
Right, or someone peripheral to the party.
Yeah.
And again, if you look at the entirety of the series, you have Max's brother died, and obviously Barb, and so there were some people that were
along the way
were bigger characters that didn't make it. But yeah, it's certainly for this season, like we were saying, that it's like really like nobody else, nobody, so yeah.
Yeah, very interesting they decided that.
Yeah.
And I get it, because you don't want it to be. I was surprised they didn't, but then as soon as the internet started having opinions, someone made a good point, which was this is essentially a show about kids, and did we want a bunch of kids to die? No, but could Murray have died? Could Mr. Clark, or could Hop or Joyce have died? There were these other very important characters to the story that weren't children that could have really impacted how the story ended.
Yeah, I agree, and it's just the idea that they all survived. You can kind of chalk that up to this thing that happens when you're doing series, whether they're multiple movies or they're television, episodic television, that the producers and the creators, in this case the Duffer Brothers, they start to become attached to these characters because they've created them. They've watched the actors bring them to life, and they've fleshed them out with their scripts and their stories. And then they get to the point of like, I don't want to kill them.
Yeah.
and so maybe, who knows, right? Maybe the original plan that the Duffers had was that it was going to be a little bit bloodier and the party was not going to emerge unscathed. But then as they were going on making the show, they just said, no, forget it. I like all these people. I don't want them to go. They're going to make it. That is a thing that happens. I mean, that very famously, going back to Star Wars with George Lucas, Han Solo was supposed to die in Empire Strikes Back, and he then liked the character so much that he stepped in and changed his mind and said, no, we'll just put him in freeze him and put him in carbonite instead.
Yeah.
But again, that was the thing, right? I mean, that if you go back and look at the original drafts that they were preparing for that story, that's what was supposed to happen, and he just basically said, yeah, that's not going to happen. So it does happen from time to time. So, but you're right, it is an interesting point that we only the whole season, really the only major good guy death we got was Kali. That's
Yeah.
A little light, people, a little light.
Yeah, a little light. And another thing, I watched through all of the credits, not the first time through, but one of these multiple viewings I've done recently to get prepared for the podcast, and they do this really great, if you haven't had a chance to go through the full final credits, you should do it, because they do this really great version of it where you're like, is that a D&D manual? And they kind of use the D&D manual as a like a template, and they put all of these drawings that are all of our characters, and it's throughout the series. It's stuff from season 1, season 2, season 3, season 4, final season, like all these different, and they use these really great drawn out images for when they go through the cast list and they show each person, and it's all these great images. And then as they get to like some of the, secondary characters, these really great images of them. And it's really wonderfully done. And then when they get to the end of the credits, it like the camera pans back and they flip over the cover, and it says Stranger Things Player's Manual.
Mm-hmm.
So it's literally just like a D&D player's manual, except this whole thing was modeled after all the Stranger Things guys. I thought it was a really, really nice little tight way to sort of end it all. So that was your last little image of the show.
Yeah. Well, and it's sort of like the cover of it, and the picture they have is the kids on their bikes, and they're looking, and they're in the foreground, and in the background is the mind flare.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those kind of iconic images from the show of
yes.
That. And so I love that. And when they are showing these drawings, which first of all, they're line drawings that are directly like the drawings that are in the original D&D books, whether it's the Player's Handbook or the Dungeon Master's Guide, or any of the other things that they had, the Monster Manual or whatever. So that was a nice little touch. But the other thing is when they kind of push in on these drawings, and like they'll show a picture of Winona Ryder as Joyce, you look, and around it they filled out all the text, and they'll have like spells that you can cast in the game, and it'll say like how many, how long does it take to cast, what ingredients do you need, all these like little things that are real things that are in those books. And so it was they clearly spent a lot of time making that. And my thought was like, I didn't look, but I think they would have put that out on the market to sell it.
Yeah. Maybe they will now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you'd think it'd be like, yeah, okay, let's get that out there for all this, younger generation that watched the show and were curious about D&D. But it's like, hey, you can play kind of D&D, but play the Stranger Things universe. Ooh.
Yeah.
So yeah,
absolutely.
So yeah.
So those are my honorable mentions. What have you got on your list there?
First one is Bowie. You can always tell when something's wrapping up when they put Bowie in the soundtrack. That's just like a dead giveaway. And so of course they end the show with "We Can Be Heroes," right, which is a classic Bowie song. And it's kind of triumphant, but it's also kind of sad. I mean, it's this kind of quintessential Bowie song from not from the 80s, right? It's from the 70s, but still it fits. It's very appropriate. And the main line of the song is "We can be heroes for just one day," and it's sort of kind of sums up what we had here, that all these kids, that they're not heroes 24 hours a day, or even most of the time, but when the moment came, they stepped up and they did what they had to do and all that kind of stuff. I like that, but again, it's kind of a very, very like an old go-to kind of a stand, an old thing that like, oh yeah, we want to wrap it up. Yeah, just throw a Bowie song in there. We're good. And then the other thing, there's a moment there before graduation where Mike's mom gets in touch with Hop and says that she can't find Mike, that he's not in the house, and they're getting ready to go to the graduation and so on. And so then Hop eventually finds him, and he's in like downtown Hawkins, like there's a memorial that they've built, and this is 18 months after, so a lot of the crap has been cleaned up and the town is kind of rebuilt and kind of trying to get back to normal. And Hop has this kind of great little speech to Mike about, look, you got, there are two roads right now that you can go down. And one is where you blame yourself for everything that happened, and you feel like you don't deserve to have any kind of happiness because it's punishment for what happened. And then the other way is where, you realize that, it wasn't your fault, and Elle made her choice, and she, which road she would want you to go down. And he ends it up by saying, I went down the first way and I don't recommend it. And it's just a really first of all, it's probably like the nicest moment that Hop has ever had with Mike in the entire show, right? When he's not yelling at him or whatever. But it's a really of a sweet moment where you kind of get this idea of old experienced person trying to tell young, ignorant person, look, man, don't do this because I've done it and it doesn't work and it's not worth it.
Right.
And you kind of get the sense that, most of the time, the younger person is like, yeah, screw you, old guy. You don't know. I know. I know more than you do. You know what I mean? You get that kind of ignorant, like, I don't need your help kind of a response. But I think in this case, I get the sense that Mike hears him. And it's like, yeah, maybe you're right, maybe, and then of course he shows up for graduation and things progress on from there and so on. I just thought it was a cool little quiet, moment between two characters that really didn't have too many quiet moments in the entire history of the series. So that made my mention. So what did you like that scene? What did you think of that?
Yeah, I like it too. And it's kind of a, it also ties a little bit into the final sort of, I believe, moment, to me, which is, I think Mike also thinks, I think Mike thinks that Elle would never, like, intentionally hurt Hopper or him. And it's like being around Hop sort of like reiterates that it's like, I'm not the only one that lost Elle. Hopper did too, and obviously all of our friends. So I think when Hop says that about it not being his fault, I think it helps open his mind to other possibilities. Well, if it's not my fault, then what could have happened? And then he's much more analytical in the moment and comes up with this story, which, whether or not you believe it's true or not. So, yeah. But it's a really good scene, and like you said, they normally don't have anything more than two words to say to each other most times, but it's which makes that moment strangely kind of significant, in the end. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's, well, before we go any further, I did want to ask this to you, and that is, looking at the entirety of the series,
yes.
What, if any, is your do you have a favorite moment or a favorite, part, whether it's the beginning, the middle, the end, whatever? Is there anything that stands out, not just from this season, but the series entire,
Previous
all
season.
46 episodes or whatever there are?
It's funny because like before the show came back in November
Mm-hmm.
with these most recent episodes, I did do a rewatch
You
because
did?
I wanted to sort of refresh my brain, get myself right into focus for that. And so many really great moments through the years. Um and I really do love those moments in the first season when we're getting to know the group.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, honestly, the one time that I was really on the edge of my seat and was it was the most emotionally pulled in that this show ever got me was Max in the air at the cemetery.
When you thought she was gonna die.
We thought she was gonna die, and then when she didn't, like the just the release of that just being so, and it wasn't just her being in the air, it was everything she was going through in Henry's mind, and the song and the running, and you know she had been rejecting life because she was so guilty over Billy and all this other. There was so much emotion tied together in that moment, and it was really, really well done. They've done such a good job through the years of hitting on these emotional moments, and I think that's where that's the, to me, it's the pinnacle. It's the one where they really, really whipped all those emotions into a little souffle there, and then just like it was absolutely perfect. That's mine. What about for you? What's your answer to that question?
First of all, that is an amazing moment, and yeah, that was like we talked about it before. Like that was a moment where, as I'm watching her and she's running, right, and she's trying to get away, and then we see her in the real world get lifted up and everything, and you're watching it, and as I'm like saying out loud, like, oh my God, they're gonna freaking kill her. I mean, you just saw it coming, right? You were just waiting, and it's rare. It's very rare for me that television does that when it is so that riveting, like you said, edge of your seat kind of stuff. So great
Yeah.
moment. And I can't remember if we talked about this on air, maybe this was off air, but before the season even started, my view on Stranger Things had been that season one is the greatest season of them all. And this is before I'd even seen this season.
Right.
And then when this season came out and I watched it and I enjoyed it and it was fun, but I finished up at when it was over thinking that season one is still the greatest season of this show. And if the Duffer Brothers had never done anything past the end of season one, it would have gone down as epic, amazing television. And my personal view would be, man, that was a really good show. And I would probably be a little disappointed that they didn't do more. It's like, they could have squeezed another season out of that. I would have had that kind of
Right.
like, why didn't they? But I would have been satisfied.
Mm.
And I think that it's diminishing returns after season one, that you have this kind of weird combination of season one, the Duffer Brothers had a very small budget and they really had to work and hone their story and tell it very tightly and not go crazy with stuff because they just didn't have the money. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so good.
Mm.
And so when season one ends, you get this weird combination of Netflix literally drives like a dump truck full of money up to their house and says, please do more episodes. We'll let you do whatever you want. And don't worry about money. And so you have this, suddenly there's no constraints and you can do whatever you want. And I don't want to think this, but I do, that I kind of think the wouldn't it be cool list might have shown up somewhere in one of the Duffer Brothers meeting conference rooms, where they're like, what can we do? And then one of them went, what would be cool if there was like a secret Soviet base underneath a mall in Indiana, like, staffed by like army troops wearing Soviet uniforms. And the other one went, that's really cool, and they added it to the list, right?
Right.
And so you have that, and then you have this kind of natural desire whenever you do another season of a show that's a huge hit. You the showrunners, the producers, the writers, they have this idea in their head that we got to do bigger, we got to do better, we got to make it, more amazing than the last amazing thing we did. And that's where you can kind of get into trouble, and I think when you look at the storylines that they trotted out, the Soviet base that could never ever happen in Indiana, the whole going to Russia thing with Hop and all of that, and then the idea that Joyce and Murray are gonna be able to sneak into the Soviet Union and rescue him in 1985. Really? You think so? That's gonna happen? I mean, it got very ridiculous, and I know a lot of the fan base was unhappy with a lot of those moments in the middle part of the middle seasons of the show. And I think it got better. I think the Duffers kind of went, okay, we need to correct, and they did. But ultimately for me, yeah, it's season one. Season one, and my all-time favorite moment of this entire show, from episode 1 to the very end, is still in season 1 when Nancy and Jonathan go to the hardware store and they're buying bullets and rope and traps and all this stuff, and they bring it up to the counter, and this dude who's behind the counter looks at all this stuff and goes, what are you going to use all this stuff for? And they deadpan serious go, to hunt monsters. And he's just like, okay, all right. And he just that is my favorite moment of the show. And I still have to say it, and that is, there is no justice for Barb even to this day, and that is a crime that needs to be corrected. So Barb will live on in my heart forever. So
it's interesting. I really wish that they had done something. I mean, they did with Nancy's little
Nancy
the things that
her,
harmed
regret.
me. Yeah, her regret moment there, and when they showed, so she appeared in the finale. I wish that they had done more. I wish they'd been a little bit more, just because she's such an iconic character that everybody feels, like you said, should have had a little bit more justice.
Yeah, well, I mean, the authorities, the townspeople, they just whitewashed her, and everybody was just worried about Will, and it's like, but she disappeared too, But yeah. So anyway, So that's my takeaway. Yeah, season 1's the best season out of all the seasons, and that's my favorite moment is those two in the hardware store, and that guy just being like, yeah, all right. And just going back to reading his magazine or whatever. So that and it's just to me, it's just so 80s of a moment where people, we were very lax on a lot of things back then.
Oh yeah.
And just sort of like, hey, you want to buy a box of bullets? Okay. Nowadays you need 10 forms of ID and all that stuff, right? But back then they'd just be like, yeah, sure. So Anyway, I'm sorry to digress. I know it wasn't on the list, but I wanted to bring that up because this is the series finale.
And do we feel so obviously, taking what you just said, do you feel like they stuck the landing for the ending?
You know what? I like the ending. I'm not, this isn't like the Seinfeld finale where you're kind of like, what was that? And I think they did a good job of tying up all the story threads and giving everyone a satisfactory ending. Is it what I would have done? I don't know. I'm not necessarily sure what I would have done. But like I said, I think the fact that they made Eleven's ending so ambiguous and so open to interpretation, and there is no definitive answer, and I don't believe they've ever answered that question. Right. In interviews and things, I think they've kind of said, it's whatever you want to make it out to be. Like you said, choose your own adventure, right? It's if you think she's still alive and is living a life out there somewhere, good, great, that's awesome. If you think that she sacrificed herself because she knew she had to, okay, that works too. It's whatever. So I think on that front they did a good job. I'm satisfied with it. You know what I mean? I like we were talking before. It is series like this that rise to the level of success and have the fan base that this has do not have a great track record of ending well.
Right.
If you look back over the last 50 years of television when this started to become a thing, it's not a good track record. There's a couple that did okay. There's one or two that did really well, but a lot of them you're kind of like, really? That's it? And this was not that. I think they did a good job. What about you? What did you think?
I think on my first viewing I was okay. I was like, okay, that's fine. But I've grown to really enjoy it more on these multiple viewings to do for the podcast. So thanks, podcast, for helping me with that. And I think that it was a good ending, and by leaving the L stuff ambiguous, it makes it, like I said, choose your own adventure, makes it what people want it to be. I think that helps it. I don't think that it's going to win any awards for best series finale of all time kind of thing. But I think that they did a really good job. I wouldn't say that they stuck the landing. I would say that they did, if we're using the gymnastics metaphor, they took like maybe one or two small like steps after landing, but they came very, very close, very, very, very close to it.
Okay.
I think it was very good. Considering all of the things that they had to do and had to wrap up and had to sort of convey, and the fact that they did it in just the 2 hours is, to me, crazy. So yeah.
Cool.
Anything else we want to do before we sort of stick a pin in by stick a pin, finish our coverage of Stranger Things forever?
I think 2 hours and 40 plus minutes is more than enough time. Certainly we could have really, nitpicked every little moment, because there was a lot of stuff we didn't really talk about, but and I'm sure there are people that are listening going, you didn't talk about the thing that was so cool. And it's like,
You'd be here until next Thursday.
Right. We could do like 10 episodes on the finale if we really wanted to, but no, I think we did a good job. I think we really kind of got into it and got to share like what we really felt and thought about it. So it was fun.
Yeah, and really I'm really glad that we sort of changed our format to the like trying to stick to the 5 points in time for this, because it really helped me. I had a couple other things written down and I was like, yeah, but these things are more important. And I ended up in my list, I shifted some things around and moved some things around and didn't include certain things. And I'm okay with that, because I really feel like I covered the things that really hit me the most and made the most for the episode and for the series. So
yeah, awesome.
Yeah, we did good. High five us.
Nice.
All right, so that being said, at this point in the podcast, we would normally take a break and talk about our feedback, but guess what, folks? We didn't get any. And you know what? That's fine, because I think a lot of people have already watched and seen this, and they've already made their feelings known on the internet, and didn't get to hear. But hopefully we get folks who will maybe listen in and maybe send us an email or a message after the fact and let us know what you thought of the finale in relation to what we said. Like, did you believe at the end? Do you think Elle is alive or Elle is dead? Like, what do you think of all of that? So let us know what you thought of our coverage and whether or not it lines up with what you thought of the finale. That'd be a really interesting thing to hear. So yeah, send those thoughts in still.
Yeah.
So next up on the podcast, we are going to dive next week into a fantastic movie that Steve has wanted to cover for a little bit, and it's got so many connections and tendrils to the Walking Dead universe. So we're going to take the time to delve into The Mist next week. And
yay.
Very excited about that. So make sure before next week, if you have never seen it, like me, make sure to try and find it on, I think right now There's a couple of free platforms where you could watch it and get the commercials, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's probably your best bet. Otherwise, I think it's available to rent on Amazon Prime. So, which is probably going to be the route I'll go. So yeah, so The Mist, we're very excited about that. We're going to have lots of fun talking about that, all of the, connections to Walking Dead, Frank Darabont, the cast, Stephen King, all this stuff. We got plenty of stuff to talk about next week. So be sure to watch it for the first time, or maybe watch it for the second, third, fourth, 500th time. I don't know. But
yes, well, and all I will add is that there is a black and white version that is spectacular if you've never seen it, and that was how Frank Darabont wanted to do it, and the studio said absolutely not, because the studios believe that people won't go see black and white movies anymore. And like you were saying, there's just so much connective tissue to Walking Dead.
Oh yeah.
This movie came out in 2007, so it's right before Walking Dead went on the airwaves, 2 years later, and I believe Darabont went directly to working on Walking Dead after this movie. You have Melissa McBride is in it, the actor who played, oh man, what's his name? The guy who won the RV.
Dale. Jeffrey
Dale.
Dumont. Jeffrey
Dumont. Yeah. Jeffrey Dumont is in it. There's Laurie Holden has a big part in it. So there are several, Walking Dead actors from the initial, first couple of years of the show obviously are there. I mean, Melissa McBride, made it the whole way, but you know what I mean. And yeah, it's a Stephen King property, which is great. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you think of it, because this movie, when I saw this in the theater, there are scenes in this movie that literally I fell off my chair in the movie theater. I couldn't believe it. It was just so amazing. A very Lovecraftian, which warms my heart to no end. And so yeah, I'm really excited that we're finally getting around to covering it. Wow. And I definitely want to see if you were into it or if you were not. So.
Wow. And we're thinking when we're finished with The Mist, we'll probably have a couple more movies that we're going to cover. We're considering doing something secretive. When you listen in to our episode of The Mist, then we'll reveal what the next movie is, and maybe even Steve doesn't even. And then do that from week to week. We're considering doing that for a couple of weeks and, sort of shake things up. But I also wanted to ask the listeners, too. We talked a few weeks ago about one of the Duffers' next projects is this series called The Burrows, which is coming to Netflix next month. Starts on May 21st. It's 8 episodes. There's some really good trailers out there to watch. And it looks very sort of spacey, mysterious, science fiction-y, as opposed to a little less on the violence end. I didn't see anything that indicated blood or a lot of death. So, but just very mysterious and strange. And it looks super interesting. And who doesn't love Alfred Molina? And Dennis O'Hare from the American Horror Stories is in it as well. So it looks very interesting. And we were just putting out some feelers now. I mean, we've got about a month before it comes out. If folks would be interested in us covering that. So we're considering it. So I think the whole season dumps on the same day. So it looks like we'll have an opportunity to sort of see if it's, see if it's any good, but also see if there's any interest in it. If you guys aren't watching it, or if it's not on your list of things to watch next, then we'd much rather cover something that you guys are interested in listening to a podcast about. So, but that is something we're considering. So let us know your feedback and how you feel about those series as a possibility. I think that wraps it up. I really honestly can't think of anything else to talk about.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we hit everything, So yeah, definitely everybody look into the boroughs and see what you think. And if it's something that we should pursue,
Yeah.
let us know so we can kind of get your like you just said, get
Yeah,
what do you guys think? What do you guys
exactly.
want to do? So,
And
yeah. But you know what? We have some other
Oh,
ideas,
yeah.
like you said. We have some other movies and some other series and things that we might dredge up, right, and force you to watch. So
Just
there you go.
patiently awaiting for that notification of when we'll see Dead City and Daryl Dixon. Trust me, we're paying attention, but we're also trying to do interesting things until we hear about that.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just that. There's also Dune Prophecy Season 2 is supposedly coming out at some point this year. And so there are other series that we want to cover that we just are, like you said, we're sort of like in a holding pattern until they are available.
And of course, when the Dune Part 3 comes out, we will, of course, discuss that. Of course.
God, yes.
So there's plenty on the docket, that's for sure. But that about wraps it up for this week. We look forward to chatting with you folks next week when we discuss The Mist. We're very excited for that discussion. But till then, as always, I'm Diana.
And I'm Steve.
And don't forget to always aim for the head.
Because this is our year, people. And body shots, they just don't work.
To send us an email, write us at aimfortheheadpodcast@gmail.com. And our Twitter handle is @AFTH Podcast. Pictures and video are always welcome at our Instagram account, Aim for the Head Podcast, all one word. But the best way to keep in touch with us is to just like our Facebook page to get all of our updates in your feed.
Can't just get rid of
You
Steve.
can't. Look, you've tried for years.
You cannot get rid of Steve. And that at hour 1:21. That's the B-roll.